Thank you all for joining us this evening and welcome to the Tuesday, December 20th, 2022 Louisville City Council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order and I'll ask our city clerk for a roll call.
Mayor Stolzman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Here.
Councilmember Lay? Councilmember Most?
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Here.
Councilmember Fahey?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, everyone. That takes us to our public comment period for items that are not on our agenda or items that only appear on our consent agenda. If you'd like to make a comment, please fill out a comment card that you'll find out in the lobby. And when you comment, just stand up and tell us your name and the town you live in, and then tell us what you'd like to tell us. Each person will have 3 minutes. And if you're commenting online, go ahead and click the raise hand icon that you'll find at the bottom of your panel. First this evening on comments on items not on our agenda or items that are only on our consent agenda is Christina Edstrom.
All right, is this on? Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Stolzman and City Council members. And I'm from Boulder County Public Health. My name is Christina Edstrom, and I work at Boulder County Public Health. For the past year, I've led a community coalition in Louisville called Healthy Louisville Kids, which is made up of Louisville residents, local healthcare professionals, and representatives from nonprofits like Dental Aid, Clinica, Community Food Share, American Heart Association, and more. We've been working to educate the Louisville community about the harms of sugary drinks, especially for kids, for the past 12 months. We've talked to hundreds and hundreds of residents at several community events like the Louisville Street Fair and Farmers Market, hosted sugary drink documentary nights, had a passive educational display at places like the Rec Center and the library, invited City Council to make September Sugary Drink Free September, and had a fun corresponding community challenge with over 100 participants. Thank you for the proclamation. We recently formed a youth coalition made up of 12 high schoolers too, and they're excited to reduce sugary drinks in the community. They've named their group Just Add Water, which I thought was really cute. Our goal now is to pass a healthy drinks and kids meals ordinance in Louisville. The ordinance makes the healthy drinks like water and milk the default on kids meals, although of course people can still order whatever they want. Basically, if a kid comes in for a kid's meal and it comes for one price, including the meal and the drink on the printed menu needs to be a healthy one, but restaurants can still serve other drinks to their customers. So far in Colorado, this ordinance has been passed in Lafayette, Longmont, and Golden. Several companies have already successfully implemented this policy. It's been shown to be effective at Disneyland, where customers choose the healthy default about 67% of the time. And at McDonald's, Happy Meals sold with soda has decreased from 63 to 48% from 2013 to 2018 after they adopted this policy. There's already support for this ordinance in Louisville. We've collected over 140 support cards for our ordinance, and additional 100 people have signed an online support card. The ordinance requires a low effort to implement upfront and would set a precedent that prioritizes the health of the Louisville children for years to come. There's really no downside in passing this ordinance, especially with the support that Boulder County Public Health will be offering to restaurants and in managing compliance. And there's just so much to gain. The time is now to make every effort to stop the quickly growing trends of obesity and chronic disease that this current generation of children are facing, and ensuring that young people in Louisville have the opportunity to grow up to be healthy. Please consider putting the Healthy Drinks and Kids Meals Ordinance on your 2023 agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for the technical difficulties during your presentation.
Quite all right.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, do we need to take a 5-minute recess to reset, or are we okay? All right, so it seems that we won't be able to broadcast our video over Zoom, that we're having a technical challenge that hopefully we can resume next time, but let's see if we can take a Zoom public comment and see if that end is still working. So our next commenter is Sherry Summer. Sherry, it looks like you're unmuted. Oh, no, there you go. All right, we cannot hear you, so it looks like we have unfortunately lost our ability to do Zoom participation. And as we post on every agenda, when we have an in-person meeting, the virtual meeting, we try to accommodate to the best of our abilities, but when we have a technical problem like this, we can just carry on with our in-person meeting. So I apologize, and feel free to email City Council and let us know what you'd like to tell us. Our next public, or come on down. If you're home and can make it over, we'll still be here. Our next commenter is Michelle Nelson.
Hello. I'm Michelle Nelson. I reside in Superior. I am the executive director over at Dental Aid here in Louisville. But good evening, Mayor Stoltzman and City Council members. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. I am here to support why I agree with the Healthy Louisville Kids Coalition, why reducing the sugary drinks is so important. And why I think it's so important for us to put it on the ordinance for the 2023 work plan. As all of you know, probably by now, Dental Aid, it highly sees a lot of kids with really high caries, which means that we are dealing with a lot of kids that have really high decay. And a lot of these things that we're discussing with the parents each time they come in is trying to pick one thing that we can help them with every 6 months. And one of those things, unfortunately, is bringing sugary drinks off of their menus. So even if we had a little bit of help in this way, it would be really huge for our purpose as well. And we truly believe that when kids do pick water or milk, it is just something that's brought out of their day-to-day, and they start just choosing those healthy options instead of the sugary ones. Tooth decay is also the most common disease in childhood, and it's painful. It affects their ability to eat, speech, and affects their ability to come to school every day. A lot of our parents also face the choice of having to take off of work to get their kids to come to school, or between bringing them to school so they could go to work or bringing them to their dental appointments. So a lot of our families, they're relying on other people to bring their kids to their appointments. And in more severe cases, they need sedation, which a lot of insurances don't cover, and it's usually around $4,000. So, but yeah, the primary cause is the diet and high sugar, with the main source being in sugary drinks. So healthy drink options should be easily accessible in places where kids and families spend their time, and healthy drinks consumption should be encouraged both through education and policy. To this end, adopting a healthy drinks and kids policy will not only encourage families to choose water and milk over soda, and will help in making healthy choices outside of the restaurants. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to our consent agenda this evening. So I have a request to take item C off consent agenda, and we'll put that at the end after E. Any other removals from consent agenda? Seeing none, I move to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. The consent agenda passes as amended. That takes us to our council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda. Any council comments this evening? Councilmember Fahey.
I have one. I just want to thank whoever it was that put this lovely Christmas card in my mailbox. It's wonderful. It's a handmade card. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. Any others? All right, seeing none, that takes us to our city manager's report. City Manager Durbin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind you that City Hall will be closed for the holidays, December 23rd, 26th, and January 2nd. The library is closed on the 24th and the 25th, and I believe on the 1st. And Adam, am I missing anything as far as rec center and golf?
The Recreation Center will be closed on Christmas. Golf is closed on Christmas. Recreation Center is open on New Year's Day for those of you that are into that kind of thing on New Year's Day.
Thank you. And then some of our staff worked with a local filmmaker to put together a employee appreciation video. It's 2 minutes long. If you'll indulge us, I'd love to share that with you.
As we approach the one-year mark for the Marshall Fire, I think it's, regardless of how bad it was and the catastrophic event, there's still something to be thankful for. I'm proud of the city staff.
We were in and out of smoke and wind and fire, and now we're rebuilding. It's taken every department, it's taken every person.
So much work has gone into building back almost 550 homes and businesses here in the community.
I'm proud to be a part of this crew because of the way that everybody just came together.
The organization, a bunch of pros, a bunch of real, true, dedicated public servants.
What is an exciting piece is that we know that we are only a piece of what's being built in the city.
Just the behind-the-scenes work of our local government in providing permits, providing engineering services, working with the utilities, getting all the infrastructure in place is phenomenal.
It's people showing up for each other, not just for today, but for the long haul.
Places like the library and the rec center and the senior center have really created stability. They've provided a nurturing environment.
The biggest thing that I can say about like the recovery and things like that is just how fast everything's going.
During this whole response and recovery phase, has been an honor and a privilege to be a part of it.
There is no policy that you could write to deal with a catastrophic, fast-moving fire. So what you have to rely on is good people, good staff, good city employees, and good community members that are taking care of each other. In the city of Louisville, we didn't have a single loss of life or a single injury from that fire.
Well, I'm just grateful that I work for such a great agency that has taken care of us. I've seen the work they do. They will all tell you we're just doing our job.
We are going to get through this. We are going to pull together, and collectively we did it. The fire is out, the rebuilding has started.
City staff has helped throughout the recovery in every way possible.
Thanks to all the City of Louisville staff, the staff of the Louisville Fire Protection District, and all of Boulder County, the community all came together, as did other communities in the state.
We're really fortunate to have the people we have. So thanks for letting me share that, and that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us to our regular business. First item on our agenda tonight is 612 Jefferson Avenue, request for landmark and historic preservation grant. We'll take up Resolution 51, approving the landmark designation for the home, and also Resolution 52 for the grant. I'll turn it over to our city staff. Amelia, will you take it away?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Amelia. This is my first presentation before you all. I'm the new Historic Preservation Planner, and I've been in that role since August. So thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so as you mentioned, Mayor, we've got two resolutions regarding 612 Jefferson Avenue. You can see the location here, and then some historic and current photographs. And then just to speak briefly to the criteria for landmarking. So some of the highlights here are that it is the structure and the property are associated with the coal mining history and also with the Blue Parrot, so the local service economy. So kind of hitting two parts of the economic history there. And then also this structure has retained its historic form and its size and location. And in fact, the applicants and the property owners are pursuing restoration work that would keep it in its current form as well, which is sort of rare. And that's sort of what's mentioned in the alteration certificate report, which was approved by HPC in November. And so just with that very brief presentation, staff does recommend approval of this landmark and that it be named for the Lecompton Hicks families. And also, again, HPC recommended approval of the landmark with no conditions. That's probably my reminder to be here, actually. Thanks, Rob. Okay, so then to the grants. So this is a request for a preservation and restoration grant. The total amount is $100,875. So just to note that that is above the maximum of $40,000 for a preservation and restoration grant. However, our resolution and our code does have language that allows exceeding of that amount in extraordinary circumstances. So just also to note that this and all the grants tonight that you'll hear will be matching. So that means that the applicant or the property owner would be paying this or more, right, on this kind of work. And just briefly, staff finds that this grant request does meet all criteria. We went down the line of every request for funds and compared it to our criteria regarding whether it was preservation, restoration, or rehabilitation, and found that it did fit into one of those categories. And just a brief note on the extraordinary circumstances piece that brings us above that $40,000. The language is up there on the screen, and I'm happy to answer more detailed questions. But in general, we looked at that language and tried to see, are these requests related to architectural details, condition, size, et cetera, and found that each time that that request was being made for that larger amount, it was related to something related to restoration, preservation, or rehabilitation. So with that, staff is recommending approval of this resolution as well, and also to note HPC did recommend approval in November without conditions. So that's the end of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I don't think there are any questions. Did the owner want to make any comments?
We do have the applicant here, yes.
You're not required to, but you're more than welcome to say anything you'd like to.
I think it's up.
Thank you. I do have a presentation put together. Josh Johnston, DAJ Design, 922 Main Street. I'd like to start off by saying that this is an exciting project for us because it is one where we are retaining the original footprint and massing of the house without any proposed additions. So thank you for your consideration, and with that, I'll get started. These two Boulder County Assessor images were discovered during the HSA. You can see that the overall form of the house remains the same while the siding and windows have changed. Excuse me. Additionally, a covered front porch was added sometime between 1948 and 1976. The current windows are what is seen in the 1976 image, and the house was further wrapped in aluminum siding on top of the stucco. These two photographs were discovered after the HSA in a found photo album. The image on the left shows the historic window and door sizes, as well as trim details. The image on the right is an interior photograph of the house. This photo shows the historic door style, as well as beadboard panels found on the interior. This is the current house and elevation drawing created for the HSA. This photo shows the aluminum siding, and you can see that the overall form of the house has remained the same. This is a site plan showing the house footprint and 3 accessory structures. And this is the existing floor plan. Again, the original footprint of the house remains intact. The covered front porch, shown in orangish, was added. And the blue and green show what were probably decks originally that were enclosed by 1948. These are some existing images of the house showing the original massing with replacement windows, doors, and siding. The aluminum siding was removed, revealing the stucco siding beneath. We removed portions of the stucco to further analyze the condition of the foundation. We also removed a portion of stucco to reveal the original wood V-groove siding, part of a historic window opening, and the ghosting of the original window trim, which is all seen in that rightmost image. These images show the interior of the house after several layers of wallpaper and the beadboard panels were removed. What can now be seen are the original window and door locations and sizes. Additionally, we now have further evidence of the original trim as seen in the ghosting around the door opening. These images show the framing methods that were used. Some of these methods are common for Louisville, though some are seen and less common, and others appear to be unique to this house. These images show the condition of the foundation. We know that the existing house footprint is original because of the continuous concrete foundation. Evidence from the crawl space revealed that the eastern portions of the foundation are in need of replacement, and removing the stucco revealed that the exterior face of the foundation is in need of repair. The next slides show the existing house and what we propose as restoration. So this is the west existing and the west proposed, northwest existing, northwest proposed, southwest existing, southwest proposed, the east existing, and the east proposed. On this one, we are requesting an alteration to the east facade with new windows and a door. However, the massing and footprint remain the same. And then this is our breakdown of the funding. Our first column highlights each request item. The second column are costs that were put together by Scarborough Contracting, who has worked on historic houses in Louisville. The third column are funds that we typically see, and you can see that that adds up to the typical 40,000 fund request. The fourth column are the funds that qualify for extraordinary circumstances. And the last column are the funds that will be matched by the homeowners. Each fund that is being requested is matched in equal or greater amounts by the homeowners. This is the case for both typical items and extraordinary circumstances, as Amelia pointed out. And then the bottom row shows the total budget for the project, the funds requested, and the cost to the homeowners. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any members of the public care to comment on this application this evening? Seeing none, any council discussion or motions or comments? Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this. It's really cool to see a house proposed that will retain its original footprint and size. It just reminds me of a lot more of the houses that I remember growing up in downtown. So I really appreciate the applicant's commitment to keeping this as original as possible. With that, just to frame the discussion, I'll go ahead and move that we approve Resolution 51, Series 2022.
Great. Councilmember Lay? Oh, there's a motion and a second. Councilmember Lay? Did you want to add any other discussion? Councilmember?
I think this is a gorgeous project. This does exactly what we want to do with these funds, and I'm just wholeheartedly supportive. So thanks for the good work.
Thank you. Councilmember Most?
Yeah, same thing. I just think it's beautiful to see this house restored the way it was. And, you know, we have a lot of lots all over the community, and I'm not referring to the fire victims, but people who are just kind of building really kind of large structures that don't feel like they belong. And this is so nice to be able to actually retain the historical quality, size, feel. I think it's really lovely, and I think it's fabulous. So,
Councilmember Fahey?
Reiterate what's already been said. I think it's wonderful that you're planning to preserve the size in particular and to go back to the original window sizes to make it even more historic in its appearance, I think is wonderful. And to not be adding an addition onto the back or something that some do, that's just wonderful for me. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two comments. First, Councilor Lay jumped ahead of me as seconding it, so I agree with Councilor Brown in saying this is a project we want to approve. This project is an example of exactly what we want to do in Louisville, in Old Town, I'm in total support. I have a couple comments, and one's a question for the planner, Amelia. Welcome to Louisville. In the staff document, I didn't see really talking about the funding we have available for these types of grants. Do you know what the current fund balance is?
Yeah, so we reviewed this recently, and we do need to shore up our exact amounts, but I can give you estimates. So we have, it looks like a little over $3 million total in the fund, and we're estimating that around $1 million is already encumbered, so things that haven't been spent out. So let's give a rough estimate of around $2 million.
Okay, well, thank you very much, because that leads into my second comment. Thank you for that. I think this is, we looked at this program, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago and said, how do we incent people even more to consider doing this? And, as I look at the spreadsheet for the things that qualified and the things that didn't qualify, and I certainly understand the non-historic budget items not being considered. But some of the other items, like the foundation, it seems to me if we're going to want people to do this, then we're going to support some of the infrastructure things. And so at some point, city manager, I guess I'd like this looked at and the staff come back with a proposal. If we were going to increase certain categories, what would they be? What would be the justification? Because with the balance of $2 million out there, it seems that we could put this to good use and because it's an incentive program, and how can we do more incentive for these types of projects? Because I'm very much in support of this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh, let me just make sure. There's only one round of public comments. All those opposed? The motion carries. Is there another motion on the second resolution?
I move to approve.
There's a motion to approve Resolution 52
Second.
and a second. Any discussion of Resolution 52? And we'll have a roll call vote on that motion.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our next agenda topic this evening, which is 600 Lincoln Avenue request for landmark and historic preservation grant. We'll have Resolution 53, Series 2022, a resolution approving the landmark designation for 600 Lincoln, the Petron House. And then we'll have Resolution 54, a resolution approving the Historic Preservation Fund grant for the Petron House that we consider. I'll open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation.
Yes, hello again. Twice in one night. How lucky am I? All right. So here's the location of the house, also between Pine and Hutchinson Streets. It's a historic photograph, historic floor plan, and then the current house. And then just to give you the highlights of the landmark criteria, so this one has some folk Victorian ornamentation that's been retained from its, likely actually from its original 1904 form, if not its sort of early form. And also, similarly, has connections to both coal mining and then the general service economy in Louisville. The size and form of the house have been largely retained. There's been some changes, but actually the alteration certificate that was reviewed and approved by HPC in November does include some taking down of some things that happened in the 80s. Let's just leave it at that. So anyway, to that point, sort of increasing the physical integrity of the house. So with that, staff is recommending approval of this resolution and that the house be named for the Petron family, and also HPC recommended approval with no conditions. So in terms of the grant request, this is the same type of grant, preservation and restoration, so the same type of work, but staff did the same analysis line by line. This total grant request is $40,000 and would be matching. And as I mentioned, staff finds that it meets all of the criteria and recommends approval of this resolution for that amount, $40,000, which HPC also recommended with no conditions in November.
Thank you. If the applicant is here and would like to make a presentation, they're welcome to, and again, not required.
They're shaking their heads.
Thank you very much. Any members of the public care to comment on this application this evening? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to council members for comments and discussion. Councilmember Most.
I always am happy when people are taking away some of that 80s stuff. In fact, most of my house is that, and I could happily have that all taken away. But I'm really, again, it's really great to see people undoing things that perhaps were done without the kind of aesthetic that we are hoping to have in our downtown historic area. So I think it's great to see people really embracing that and using these funds for the types of things we'd hope they use them for.
Any other folks have comments? Councilmember Fahey?
Yes, I am also in favor of this. I'm in favor of preserving anything that anyone is willing to preserve in the downtown area in Louisville. Having been a former member of the Preservation Commission, I know what all the conditions are, and I appreciate people coming forward and adhering to them. And so I would actually propose that we approve Resolution 53, Series 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Dickinson?
Yeah, I'll just add one comment. As someone who's gone through this, I really do appreciate the amount of work and time and effort and money that it takes to preserve a home and restore it and rehabilitate it and all those little pieces. But it is really wonderful when you're done. So I'm really happy that this project is going through and that we have this fund to help with those extraordinary expenses. But yeah, I'm definitely in support of this.
Any other discussion from folks? All right, so first we're voting on the landmark designation. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. And now there's Resolution 54. Can I get a motion on that? Councilmember Dickinson?
Sure. Yep, I move that we approve resolution scrolling 54, Series 2022.
Second?
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion of Resolution 54? All right, seeing none, City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our next order of business this evening, which is ordinance number 1845, Series 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 15.18.030 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning amendments and deletions to the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code to include requirements for commercial energy use intensity performance targets and restrictions of fossil fuel space and water heating equipment. This is our second reading and public hearing is advertised in the Daily Camera on the 2nd of December 2022 and continued from the 6th, 2022. I'll open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation on the topic. Our planning director and manager, Rob Zaccaro, is here.
All right.
Community development, that's what I meant to say.
Good evening, Mayor Stolzman, members of the City Council. I'm going to be making the staff presentation this evening, and our sustainability coordinator is going to provide some information as well on the code cohort that we talk about quite a bit here. So we've got a team here to help present. In addition to Kayla and I, we have Chad Root, our chief building official. We also have Christine Brinker, who helped us draft the code and do a lot of research on this. She's with SWEEP, the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. We also have Hope Medina with Schum's Coda Associates, which is one of our building code consultants in the audience here. So we're all here to help hopefully answer any questions you have, what's going on in the region, as well as the details of the proposed code. I'm going to start just by noting, this project and our energy code efforts last year and this year are based on some of our sustainability goals in the sustainability action plan that we have. We do have goals here at the city to generate 75% of Louisville's residential and commercial and industrial electric needs from carbon-free sources by 2030 and reduce our core community greenhouse gas emissions annually below the 2016 baseline through 2030. So all of our building energy conservation codes are helping to contribute to those goals. So this is part of a work plan item that City Council has had in different phases going back to 2021. Well, this is the second phase of the work that we've been doing. I just want to remind everybody in 2021, we did adopt the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code with strengthening amendments. Those did include requirements for solar-ready construction, which we actually had since the 2018 code, but we re-upped those codes. We also have electric preferred requirements and electric-ready construction requirements within that code. So that is for both commercial and residential development. And as you know, we did the residential net zero appendix. This phase 2 effort, started with us hiring Lotus Sustainability as well as Group 14 Engineering, and we looked at what could we do beyond the 2021 code for commercial construction. And we looked at the net zero appendix. We looked at EUI standards, which are energy use intensity standards. That's a measurement of how much energy the building uses per square foot per year. So you set a target, the building has to be designed and perform to that level. Ultimately, the council asked that we come back with this ordinance, which includes EUI targets for different types of commercial construction. Council also asked that we look at different types of electrical space and water heating requirements as well. So that's included in this ordinance. We did have public engagement when we did the study earlier this year when we were looking at the net zero as well as the EUI standard. You know, there were a lot of comments that came in from the business community and others. And so the recommendation for the EUI standard was a balance between how, you know, something that was implementable and that could be achieved. And so there was, you know, pros and cons between everything we looked at between the net zero and the EUI. But in any case, this is what we move forward with and what we've drafted for consideration this evening. So the code this evening, again, we have an EUI standard, and that is for 7 different building types. I'll get into a little more detail of how that is administered. The other types that aren't included in the EU standard, they would fall to the base code. So they just have to meet the 21 IECC that we adopted last year for commercial buildings if they aren't included in those EUI standards. And then, of course, the water and space heating requirements for all commercial buildings, and there's a lot of exceptions for different reasons that we are recommending for different types of systems and buildings within that code. So here's the EUI standards. It's multifamily, office, school, and warehouse. These are the building types that we're recommending an EUI standard for. We looked at a lot of other jurisdictions that are studying this. City of Boulder has implemented EUI standards for these specific building types at this level. So we're looking at, it's pretty well vetted comparatively with City of Boulder, so that's how we landed on these categories as having the EUI standards. How this is implemented is when somebody comes in and they're designing their building and they're in for building permit, they have to model the building and demonstrate how the construction is anticipated to meet the EUI standard with building envelope, construction methods, mechanical systems, and then after the building is built, then within a 3-year period, they have to get 12 months of data, submit that to the city to demonstrate they're in compliance as well. So there's a compliance requirement afterwards. As we also staff is recommending that we start with these categories and these standards. We do, hope over time that these could be expanded and further developed. As Kayla will talk a little bit about the code cohort work, and they are planning kind of a phased implementation of probably similar standards. At least that's what they're talking about as a group. So when it comes to the space and water heating, this is a way to limit natural gas and other combustibles as a way to further limit greenhouse gas emissions with new construction. There are some types of systems and businesses where it can be more difficult to meet all electric standards. There's different codes they have to meet that require a lot of air exchanges. And so we do have some fairly broad exemptions for certain business types that we think would have difficulty meeting that standard. I do want to note also for the space heating and the water heating, we're also limiting electric resistance. So it would have to be heat pump technology, but there are some exceptions for certain types of electric resistance that is needed for heat pumps as backup and for other systems, which our consultants can talk in a lot more detail about if you have detailed questions about that. But in any case, we have the standard in there with certain exemptions outlined. There were questions about, well, what does it cost? We didn't do any new cost analysis. We provided some cost analysis from the Lotus and Group 14 engineering report. So it's not completely apples to apples as far as how we drafted the code, but we do have some cost information of what a mixed fuel, so both electric and natural gas, that is also meeting an EUI standard, not the EUI standard that we drafted, but a different one we were using for comparison in that report. What might it cost to build between just the mixed fuel and the EUI, and then what's the cost difference between all electric and mixed fuel? And so to go all electric, we're seeing that in multifamily, we were anticipating in the model that it could actually be less costly. Office would be more costly, and retail by 4% and 9% respectively is what we were modeling. We also looked at all electric and mixed fuel if somebody was building to the base code. So for all of those types of buildings that would just have to meet the base code, it's similar. Multifamily, we would anticipate could be less expensive. Office would be about 9% more. The retail building that we modeled had restaurants in it, and we didn't adjust for some of those restaurant needs, so it's high at 44% having to go all electric. So I'm going to turn it over to Kayla to talk more about what the cohort is up to.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'd like to provide you with an update on the building code cohort efforts to align on regional energy codes. So to assist with this regional energy code update, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, DOLA, awarded a grant to a group of communities in Northwest Denver to develop an approach that would achieve consistency and strengthen the energy codes across the entire region. The project consisted of 2 phases. Phase 1 was the adoption of IECC 2021 plus certain strengthening amendments. And then phase 2 was the development of a roadmap towards net zero energy new construction by 2030. Louisville participated in both phase 1 and phase 2 of the code cohort, but since the city did not directly fund the matching requirements of the grant, we were considered a mentor community in the building code cohort since our timeline for IECC adoption did not directly align with that of the cohort. We're about 6 months ahead of the building code cohort on the adoption cycle for these codes. For example, many of the cohort communities are just now adopting IECC 2021 plus the strengthening amendments that the cohort recommends, and amendments like the electric preferred, EV, and solar ready appendices, whereas Louisville did adopt IECC 2021 plus the strengthening amendments last year around this time. So I'm here tonight to talk about phase 2, which is the net zero roadmap. So phase 2 of the code cohort started in late summer, and it included Boulder County and all of the non-mountain municipalities in Boulder County. So City of Boulder, Lafayette, Erie, Louisville, Superior, and Longmont, as well as North Glen, Broomfield, Berthoud, and Westminster. So again, the goal of phase 2 was to discuss all of the different aspects of net zero new construction for both residential and commercial, and develop a step-by-step roadmap to achieving net zero construction by 2030. We're here tonight talking about commercial, so I did include the commercial net zero construction roadmap on this slide. And the table on the slide shows the aspects of the energy code that will be recommended for adoption by the cohort in the 2024 code adoption cycle. So the cohort is recommending on-site PV requirements, electrification of space and water heating equipment, and EUI performance standard for certain building types. So it is similar to what we're proposing tonight. Additionally, energy storage ready spaces are already required in the strengthening amendments that the cohort cities should either have already adopted or in the process of adopting through the IECC 2021. And the roadmap recommendations for 2027 and 2030, the reason why I didn't put that up on the slide is that they're actually very similar on the commercial side. The requirements generally stay the same for the recommendations in 2027 and 2030. However, the EUI performance targets become more strict as we go through code cycles. And in 2027, demand response capable equipment for both HVAC and water heating is required. And then energy storage is actually required in 2030 through the recommendations rather than just having the spaces available. The other thing to note about the roadmap is that it is a roadmap, so it's not a binding commitment by these cities. And there will be continued public engagement, energy modeling, and potentially more grant funds that will be required to actually kind of collaborate for the implementation aspect of this roadmap. But there is a draft roadmap that communities are reviewing right now, and the consultants will be publishing the final roadmap in early 2023. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rob.
All right, so thank you, Kayla. And with that, we don't have anything else to present, excuse me, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any council questions? Councilmember Fahey.
I have a couple of questions. The most recent one would be to Kayla, I guess. I'm wondering, you're talking about different compliance deadlines for the cohorts. How does that compare with the deadlines that we already have set or would set tonight?
So generally speaking, the city of Louisville is about 6 months to a year ahead of the cohort for phase 1. So phase 1 of the cohort is adopting the IECC 2021 plus the strengthening amendments. Louisville and a few other communities involved in the cohort have adopted IECC 2021. Most recently, Erie, which I believe was last week, and Lafayette was recently as well. But like I said, phase 2 of the cohort is just these recommendations for the next code cycles. And so from the cohort perspective, the communities would not be making new changes to their code until the 2024 code adoption cycle, when the new energy codes come out. And then, in theory, the cohort adopts these strengthening amendments together. Whereas if Louisville adopted tonight, that would put us, I guess, a year ahead of the 2024 code cycle.
And I just want to add, there's the strengthening amendments that they're recommending to all of the cohort jurisdictions. There are some differences to what so we're not adopting exactly the same strengthening amendments. So we could get into the details of that if you're interested. And then as well as the EUI targets that they would be developing in 2024, we don't know what they would be or how they would be developed or implemented necessarily unless I don't think we have that detail. So that'd be something that gets developed over the next year. So what we adopt tonight may have similarities to what they're looking at adopting in 2024, but we don't know how much complete alignment there would be.
Okay, so on the EUI regulations, first, would all of the cohorts regulations apply only to new construction? Ours only applies to new construction, is that right?
That's correct. Yes, I should have mentioned that.
And does the cohorts also only apply to new construction? So not remodels?
Yes, there is a portion of the draft roadmap that speaks to existing buildings, but there wasn't any conversation in the cohort phase 2 meetings around existing buildings, and it just kind of directs the municipalities in the cohort to look to other policy approaches for existing buildings, such as benchmarking, performance standards, things like that, and not energy codes. So yes, the cohort cities, it would only apply to new construction, the way that we've been working on the roadmap.
And would it restrict the HVAC and the water to all electric like Louisville's tonight would?
That is the recommendation from the cohort for the 2024 code adoption cycle.
All right, thank you.
Good question. I'm going to do a follow-up. So I want to define what new construction means. Are we talking about core and shell? Are we talking about tenant finish? So if a building is built and some portion is either repurposed or tenant finished, how does that fit into that definition?
I'll start by the way we draft. So the way we drafted the code is that if you build a brand new core and shell building, that you would have to then build it to a certain standard, and then we can give a certificate of completion, which is different than a certificate of occupancy. Chad, weigh in if I get any of this wrong. And then when there's an agreement that building owner would have to enter into as we drafted the code, and when that tenant finish comes in, they would have to comply with the EUI. So I'm talking specifically about the EUI standard. And so there's basically an agreement, and this is how the city of Boulder does it, so that at tenant finish, they do have to comply with EUI when they get their tenant finish permit, and then they have to go through the same compliance requirement, within 3 years after they get their certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, that's pretty much correct, Rob. One item that when a tenant comes in and does a tenant finish or a build out, the new equipment has to meet code. So currently, under our current code, we have, it's not, the 2021 as it's set up is not just the base code. We've actually amended quite a bit to that code for commercial buildings. So if someone comes in right now and wants to put new rooftop units in, the way that's set up under the code, and the code reads, it has to be 10% better than federal standards for those rooftop units. So basically, it makes it almost an electrification. They cannot find rooftop units that are 88% efficient out there, that are natural gas. So that actually brings it over to electrification, or they have to use gas inside the building that's not rooftop units. So that's kind of where we're looking at as far as on tenant finishes build out. If it's a new tenant finish and they have new equipment that they need to add, it needs to meet code.
So I guess my question is, let's just come up with an example. 100,000 square foot building, 70,000 of it's built out, so there's 30,000, let's say 3 years later is tenant finish. I think what I hear you saying is that they have to bring up those mechanical systems in that building to the code for all 100,000 square feet.
For, if there's an area that's not built out, say, I don't know what the numbers were, but say 30,000.
Make it up.
Okay, 30,000 square feet was built out, and then the 70,000 was not, and then a new tenant came in there. That 70,000 portion would need to be brought to current code, whatever the code is at the time.
But if the mechanicals for the building were built for all 100,000 square feet, how does that fit in that scenario?
So usually on like a core and shell, they put in just basic heating equipment just to keep it from freezing up. And it's usually, buildings in Louisville are built to 1 degree as far as the heating systems for outside temperatures. So there's a equation where it goes into. So basically what they have done on the core and shell is put in basic space heaters just to keep it from freezing up until the new tenant comes in and builds it out.
Okay,
and
so
then they'll have to
we
put
could
in
have
new
multiple mechanical systems for one building because of different tenants.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I get clarification on that
Councilmember
topic?
Dickinson.
So I'm just trying to understand, because I have an office on Front Street and they remodeled the whole thing, and so the core, when I was using this word the other day, people thought I was saying corn shell, like some of you eat core and shell. When they did that, right, they provided all the HVAC system for me, and then my job was to circulate it through my office. So when I did my tenant improvement, I didn't have any, I'm just trying to remember, like I didn't have any choice in what was being circulated in my office. Like I was a tenant of a building, and the building provided a certain type of HVAC, and I had to pay for the venting to get it in all my individual offices and my spaces and the thermostats and all of that. So I guess I'm a little confused. This is an older building, so if there's a space in that same building that's vacant right now and a tenant moves in to, let's say the building is built in 2000, and the tenant improvement is any size or a certain size, they have to, do they have to change the way the HVAC is coming to the building?
They may not. If it's existing, and say it was a bookstore before, and they turned it over into an A occupancy, such as a bar, grill, restaurant type, whatever equipment they had, if it works for that establishment, they could keep. If they have to add new equipment, rooftop units on the top, then that needs to meet the current code, which
Okay, so because I didn't, I mean, this was in place, but because I didn't need to change it, what was provided was adequate. I wasn't looking for a new source of heating or cooling or otherwise power from my office. Didn't have to engage with that. But had I added a restaurant and needed burners and all this other stuff, then maybe I'd have to meet the current code regardless of the core and shell that already existed.
That's correct.
Okay, that
Because
helps.
the mechanical equipment met your needs.
Okay.
You could use that. But a lot of times what we can see is when there's a switch out, the mechanical equipment does not meet the needs of the future tenant.
And then to Dennis's point, that doesn't mean the rest of the building, like if I put a restaurant in my portion, it doesn't trigger that the entire building has to retrofit their whole system because of my change.
Not under the codes that are proposed or we have adopted.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, were you finished with your questions?
I was done, thank you.
Councilmember Lay?
Yeah, this is a question for Kayla. Kayla, thank you for that summary. I want to dig in a little bit more because there are, based on what I heard, there's in the cohort, I guess there is, why don't you list for us all of the members of the cohort first?
So in phase 2 of the cohort, which is the roadmap to net zero new construction by 2030, it was, let's see here, so Boulder County, all of the non-mountain municipalities in Boulder County, so City of Boulder, Lafayette, Erie, Louisville, Superior, and Longmont, and then North Glen, Broomfield, Berthoud, and Westminster.
Okay. Which of those have not yet adopted the 2021 code and the strengthening strengthening amendments?
I'm going to turn that over to Hope Medina. She's our consultant from Shams Coda. She's been working with the cohort, and so she'll be able to answer specific questions about where the communities are all at in the code adoption process.
Right now, what we have is Erie that has adopted. You have Superior that has adopted, Louisville that obviously has adopted. The ones that are in the process right now are North Glen, Lafayette, Boulder, and Boulder County are in a unique situation where they're not quite through the process due to some of their staffing and situation with the Marshall Fire and so forth. Longmont has adopted already the 2021 with some amendments looking at towards working on the phase 2 option. So I hope that helps.
Okay. So the one, well, no, not quite. I'm not done with you. Sorry about that. So the ones that haven't yet adopted would be, I'm sort of trying to follow the previous. Berthoud hasn't.
Lafayette
hasn't.
is in the process of it. They all have a base of what is being presented here with some obvious fluctuations because, you know, your city has this goal, their city has this similar goal, but also has this additional item. So there's similarities, but also some uniqueness to it.
Okay.
North Glen also has not adopted.
And, you know, one of the things that we're trying to sort through is this sort of in the process, because this is it's a really interesting process overall because, I mean, trying to wrangle so many municipalities and so many particularly home rule municipalities is always a challenge, as you're undoubtedly finding in all of this. So it's always a little bit hard to know, I guess, exactly when folks are, when these things are going to come forward for those that haven't gotten to the place where we are right today, even without adopting anything more. Are some closer than others to that, would you say?
Yes, some of them have had their first reading. Some have had very extensive, like, study sessions. Lafayette, for one, because they're going well beyond what even was submitted to everyone else. But many of them have already, things have been submitted. They were already supposed to be heard, and then you know how it goes. You're on the agenda, and unfortunately, time gets away. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I had for now. I had a question for Rob, but I can wait my turn.
It's your turn right now.
All right.
Do you mind a clarification on the question you just asked? I'm just curious what Lafayette, you just said Lafayette is going like well above and beyond. I'm just curious if you know what else Lafayette's looking at.
Lafayette is looking at full electrification, aren't we? Full electrification. They also have expanded as far as they're not utilizing solar ready. They're going to require solar to be provided on the rooftops, whether you utilize the full maximum space of the roof or you utilize the calculation of the 60% of the energy use of that particular building. For commercial, yes.
And this may be a follow-up, or it may be just for Rob. Rob, you said that the cost estimates that are in the packet and that were, for lack of a better term, of the cost estimates we have to rely on. We don't have any others. What's the, is that from last summer? And, they haven't been updated, or they have been updated since?
Right, so these cost estimates were from our study earlier this year that we did, and it's the cost differential to go all electric is what we studied. And so and it was an estimate of certain systems, based on those assumptions. So, and we did office and a retail, mixed retail center, and then the multifamily.
And the modeling, as I understood it from previously, the modeling was based on not Louisville's mix, but Boulder's, is that right?
So we modeled against our base 2021 IECC code, which we had already adopted, and then we modeled against an EUI standard, but it was the New Building Institute EUI standard. So we assumed that you had to meet that EUI standard, which is, I believe, probably a bit more restrictive than what we're proposing for different building types.
Okay. Do you know about, and this may be beyond you, but do we know what cost estimates the other municipalities in the cohort are relying upon?
So I don't know that they've done their own cost estimating, and they haven't actually studied EUI yet. I think it's just, or they haven't even studied electrification. It's just a roadmap, so they haven't gone to the extent that we have, that they've modeled and done anything beyond probably what we've provided in our study earlier this year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The roadmap is in the draft phase, so once that's published, I think we'll kind of move into that implementation stage, and that's where implementation grant funding, potential energy modeling, things like that would come in from, a collaborative cohort approach.
Have any of the other municipalities discussed getting, I guess, information from their own businesses and their own communities, or banding together as a cohort to talk generate data relating to the costs of this kind of a code, adoption that we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, I might pass it over to Christine to see if she's heard anything differently from any of the municipalities. But I think, again, once we move into that implementation phase of the roadmap, that's where kind of the conversations around potential new grant funding and public engagement leading up to the 2024 code adoption cycle. If we're, looking at standardized EUI targets, I think we, at that point need to come together and talk about, okay, what building types do we want to model? What does the public engagement look like for this type of kind of regional EUI code? I don't know if you've heard anything more specific.
Councilmember Dickinson.
You guys, Kayla, this may not be fair because I don't think you were around, but if you might just know, otherwise, Rob, why are we not? So I was a little confused. I thought we were in the cohort, and even just a moment ago, you mentioned like those participating in phase 2, including Louisville, but we're not in the cohort, right? We chose to not be in it, and I'm confused as why we didn't join that. When did we have the chance to join that cohort, and when did we turn that opportunity down? And why? I'm sorry.
I'm going to turn it over to Christine Brinker from SWEEP. She is kind of leading the efforts with the cohort, so she will be able to fill in the blanks. Since you are right, I was not with the city at the time, so I'm piecing it together too.
Thank you. So here's how it went. We all applied together as a group to DOLA for a grant, and we were denied that initial grant. And then it was uncertain for a brief time period. And in that time period, Louisville said, we don't want to wait on this because it is too important. So we are going to go forward with our 2021 adoption. And then sometime briefly after that, then DOLA came back to us and said, there's a different grant we can give you. And so that's when the rest of the cohort went forward together, and Louisville was already ahead of the game. So that's why we've characterized Louisville as being essentially a mentor community, because you had dug into it about 6 months prior. But I would say that your staff has been extremely active and engaged and really helpful for all the other communities. Then and that was for phase 1 for the adoption process. Once we started phase 2, other communities around here that weren't part of phase 1 were just frankly excited about getting involved and being part of it. And so we said, yes, even though you weren't part of the original adoption, come on in, the more the merrier.
And so does that mean we are now a part of the cohort officially? Fantastic. I'm again confused. I thought we
Yes.
weren't, so we are.
Right, so I guess you weren't officially part of the phase 1, although we always list you as a mentor community, so I would say you're part of it.
Okay.
For phase 2, yes, definitely. And then the phase 2, it's a roadmap, so no one has signed on the dotted line to adopt every single element, especially because a lot of those city councils won't even be there once these new code cycles come around, but they are all excited about it and expected to follow the general roadmap.
Okay. That's helpful. I think part of the confusion is in different moments, different times we say the cohort is doing this, and it feels like we're not part of it. And then other times we're saying we're part of the cohort and we're part of phase 2. So I'm just trying to understand in what ways we are and how loose it is and how organized. I mean, I know it's not between, you can tell, it's not between council members and council members that this cohort exists, but rather through staff. And you have a seat at that table and you're at those meetings and you're in those conversations and you're letting them know what we're doing and they're letting you know what they're doing, and you're feeling like a part of that group of people, but I'm also hearing we're officially a part of that cohort and we get to influence in those meetings their decisions. We're letting them know what we're thinking about and letting them, we feel like we're kind of, collaborating just a bit ahead of schedule.
I would say yes, definitely for phase 2. Phase 1 was more cut and dry because it was the IACC 2021 plus certain amendments. I wasn't part of phase 1 because I wasn't with the city at the time, but I've been highly involved with all of the meetings of phase 2. And, I think we see with the recommendations in the cohort roadmap that it's very similar to what the city of Louisville is pursuing. And so, I think having the opportunity that we had to work with consultants this year really, gave me the ability, I think, to really actively participate and contribute to the group.
Great. And Rob, just some questions about the EUI program measurements. Like, so if you can, I know a lot of it was in the packet and I tried to read through that. There's sub-metering and other things, but so I build a new building in 2024, let's say I get a permit in 2023, I build it, it's ready in 2025. How are we measuring these numbers, right? I'm trying to learn what a 23 means, what a 31 means, right? But how are they measuring this? How are they reporting it? What are the remedies if it isn't going well? Like if they're supposed to be a 23 and they get a 25, how are they meant to remedy that? Is there like a process to that? And then finally, is there enforcement? So again, hey, I'm building a building, here's my permit, it's done in 2025, shoot, it's a 26, not a 23. Sorry, is there a fine? Is there, like, what do they have to do to remedy if they don't make it to the desired number?
So I'll probably defer to Hope or Christine to talk about how it's measured and what the report looks like, if you want to get into the documentation and how that gets measured with the sub-metering and everything else. But the way we drafted our code is it just says they have to demonstrate compliance, and if they don't, we would have to work with them to make alterations to their building until they came into compliance. We didn't provide anything specific. I know the city of Boulder, and feel free to jump in, we didn't include this in our code, but they have a more well-developed program for collecting escrow, I believe, and then if there's not compliance, there's ready money. We didn't go that far. Part of it was, we felt like from what could be implemented reasonably with our staff was part of our recommendation, how we crafted it. So if they didn't comply, they would be in violation of the code and whatever municipal provisions ultimately. If they didn't comply with the code, I assume they would end up in municipal court at some point potentially, and Kathleen could weigh in on that maybe too. So I think if somebody's violating the code and we give them notice and they don't come into compliance, there are various things that we could do for as far as like straight city code enforcement. But does anybody want to weigh in on how we actually administer compliance more technically?
Yeah, so the EUI, as you know, is energy use intensity, and that's energy use per square foot, or kBTU per square foot. And how they figure that out is they put it in. They put monthly energy bills, how much electricity use, how much natural gas use was used that month. They put that into the free and widely available tool, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, that's used by literally hundreds of thousands of buildings across the country, and it's what all the benchmarking programs use for existing buildings. So they just put in their energy use, their electricity use, and their gas use, and it tells them their EUI number. That's how it's calculated. Although, as it's drafted now, they first take out the energy use that is used for EV charging, for data centers, and for process loads. EVs in particular, because you don't want to penalize or punish them for
charging electric
vehicles. Data centers and process loads, because they're just a different beast. They don't use the same metric. It's just a totally different beast. So that's how it's measured. Then they also will submeter HVAC systems and some other loads within the building, just so they can, on an ongoing basis, see which systems are using a lot of energy or maybe more than they should, less doing pretty well, et cetera.
Do buildings already do, or do building owners already do all the sub-metering and already kind of know how they're
Some do, some don't.
doing? Do we have a sense of like what a normal, I don't know what normal is, right? Like something built in the last 20 years, a 2010 building, where those numbers compare to the numbers we're shooting for? Are they in like the 50s, or are they in the 80s, or even worse? Or are they like high 20? You know what I mean? Like how off are they? How big of a, well, that's a whole other thing, but.
I don't know specific numbers on that, but if you just take a look at what you would find in the 2009 and
If you can please talk into the microphone so folks at home can hear you.
if you looked at the 2009 energy code and then just took the incremental increases of energy efficiency to the 2021, the numbers are going to be extremely significant because the actual reality is they build to what's in the code and not necessarily going above. They're following what the code says, and so just by default, those buildings are going to have utilize more energy than something that's built today.
Great. And then I guess the reporting is just, do we get that like from Excel or do they self-report? Oh, you said they enter all that data. So is it just they just enter data into that system and then give it to us? Is there any auditing of that for accuracy? I mean, anyone can put a number in a
Good
document.
question.
Yeah.
The Energy Star Portfolio Manager program itself has some data quality checks
Okay.
integrated into it. They look for obvious errors. If you're a 0 or extremely high, it'll flag that, and then some other internal things. There are a few ways to muck with the numbers or make your numbers look better than they should be, but by and large, we hope that won't be the case.
Thank you. Let's take some public comment. First, we have Christian Dino. And just a reminder for everybody, you'll have 3 minutes to tell us what you'd like to tell us. Just tell us what town you live in, and then take it away.
Hi, my name's Christian Dino. I live at 967 Eldorado Lane, or I did prior to the Marshall. I'm currently rebuilding. As an architect, a general contractor, resident, and business owner in the community, I'm very concerned with the additional stringent requirements that are being proposed to council tonight for consideration on the IECC. Not that long ago, we were discussing kind of what the costs were involved in rebuilding for residential and, what homeowners would see for that. I've sent council a letter along with a spreadsheet identifying costs. I've done an actual case study of my own home where I've had not only the actual cost for a number of line items, but had the subcontractors bid alternates for that show kind of the differentials across the multiple codes. There are a number of things with the code that's already adopted that are concerning. For instance, the existing buildings with the tenant finish infrastructure and how that's tied in to what's required when a tenant comes into the building and what they have to bring up to new codes. There's submetering requirements that are submetering of submetering of submetering. We are creating equipment that is going to be very costly, hard to get. On my own home, with the new requirements of the electrification and having to go to the 400 amp service, 320 amp panel, the meter housing that should cost $600 off the shelf cost me $2,400 on eBay because it's the only way I could get it within the next 7 months. These requirements, these problems are just going to be multiplied. Typically, historically, code has followed kind of the industry standard of what's being done. It's been proven in the industry first, and code follows it. The IECC has taken this a step further. We are now requiring things that have not been proven, that does not have sufficient materials, equipment, data to support it. Within the codes, there's a requirement for commercial buildings that not only do they build to these standards, but then they have to show the energy use over time on a reporting structure. City of Louisville, to my knowledge, has no way of monitoring or recording this data. So how are we enforcing that aspect of the code? It seems that we've already gone too far. We've already adopted things that are going to be difficult to administer, difficult to enforce.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Eric Lund.
Hello, Honorable Mayor, City Council members, and city staff. My name is Eric Lund. I'm at 901 Main Street. I'm your new Executive Director for the Louisville Chamber of Commerce. So nice to be here, and it's a real honor to serve the community. our business community, as well as the city. Just have a couple of comments. First of all, I've talked to quite a few different restaurants and some members in the community, and there seems to be a lot of a lot of confusion and some miscommunication regarding refurbishing properties, because they all think that this new code is going to be directly impacting them as a result. Now, from what I heard, there is a little bit of that potentially if you have a building that isn't completely finished, for example. So I think that that requires a little bit more discussion, hopefully with the business community, so we can clarify that, put them at ease that this is not going to impact their business if they want to refurbish it or retrofit it or update it. So it's only new construction from what I understand. So that I think is really important. The chamber is here to help support that communication. Anything that we can do to work with the city and get the word out more effectively, we'd be glad to do. So we really do recommend that you maybe postpone this a little bit and give us that opportunity. We would love to help facilitate that. The second part is the cohort, the energy cohort. I think it's really important that the city of Louisville remains competitive in the marketplace for new businesses, attracting new businesses in construction. And so I really recommend that you try to stay in alignment as much as possible with the new cohort. And it sounds like we're way ahead of them, a year ahead. That's a lot. So especially when we're talking about a lot of new technologies and new things. So we really highly recommend that you guys consider trying to stay in alignment as much as possible with the cohort and make sure we don't get too far ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Matt Berry.
Hi, I'm Matt Berry. I'm at 740 Garfield Avenue. And I also have a box of obsolete compact fluorescent bulbs in my basement. I was required to install these as part of my building permits. And I wanted to. I mean, this was something I wanted to do too. But they were replaced with far superior LEDs well within their useful life. Again, as required by code. So now I have these mercury-filled glass that I'm trying to repurpose, not just recycle or throw away, in order to be a good steward of our environment. The path that you're on is similar, yet on a much larger scale. A little in contradiction to what's been said before, I'm involved with projects that require disposal of modern operational HVAC equipment and the purchase and installation of multiple units in order to meet the current code, just for a tenant change with no increase in heating or cooling. This waste is an environmental toll, and it's going to offset any gain that you're going to try to squeeze out with this legislation. Better, more reliable systems are just on the horizon, maybe 1-2 years out. Please don't force us to have to dispose of these 900-pound refrigerant-filled units in such short order. You think you're taking one step forward, but you're actually taking 2 steps back. You can hide under the banner that you're defending the values of our citizens, but are you really? There's a lot of smart people here, and it's really great to want to push this legislation forward and to be concerned about our environment. But I just want you guys to please look up just a little bit, take a little bit bigger of a picture to see, are you really actually making a difference? So I want to watch you guys discuss this matter, and I'm eager to see if you're considering the best interests of your constituents or your own political ambitions.
Thank you. Next, we have Peter Geis.
Hello, I'm Peter Geis at 808 Spyglass Circle. I am going to waive my time to Christian Dino.
Christian? And just so everybody knows, any people can pool time for a maximum of 6 minutes. So this will be your final 3 minutes.
To continue where I left off, other commercial construction projects that I'm working on with similar metering requirements that have diverse and very intricate sub-metering requirements wind up being 18, 24, 30 months out to get the equipment. We have projects that are 95% done, cannot be occupied for another year until we get the electrical infrastructure in place. With the full electrification and some of the requirements that are being placed right now, that's what we're looking at. And when a business is looking at coming into Louisville and they're considering here as opposed to somewhere else, and somewhere else they can be up and running and creating revenue inside of a year, but here it's going to take them 2.5 years to get to the same venture, I can't imagine that we are going to be attracting those businesses. We have a number of storefronts that are vacant all around Louisville right now that sit vacant, that we continue to heat in order to keep the pipes from freezing. As we increase the costs for tenants to repurpose these spaces, as we increase the costs for new developers, new businesses to come in and occupy these spaces, we're only going to multiply that. We're going to change the dynamic of our community, pushing a lot of these businesses out and not inviting any new ones in by making these requirements so stringent. In terms of being able to obtain this equipment and be able to achieve some of these goals, I think that it's pertinent that within the code adoption, you give some leeway to the chief building official to grant variances in regards to this. If a piece of equipment can't be obtained for 18 months, let's waive it. Let's let them do something else. The current codes are already pushing building current technology beyond kind of where it's at. This is something that's been problematic, and it's going to continue to worsen as we go through the cycle. As we increase the requirements that we are holding on these businesses, these residents that we've already done, it makes it more difficult to build, more difficult to be a resident, to be a business owner in Louisville. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rick Cron.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Crone. I'm president of the Downtown Business Association, and I've been a resident of Louisville since 1987 at 746 West Fur Court. Ordinance 1847 should not be passed tonight. Louisville was working or is maybe part of the code cohort. Whatever Louisville does should be closely coordinated with the code cohort. We're getting ahead of the code cohort. As a result, I think that some of the comments that were made, particularly by Mr. Venno, were absolutely correct. We are going to see businesses not locate here because we've made the requirements too stringent. Wait a year, wait 6 months, have the code cohort catch up. Let's do that instead. It just makes a lot of sense. We can also benefit from the collective wisdom. We are out there with, I think, pretty obviously incomplete numbers. We don't know the costs. We don't know the benefits. We're definitely short on the benefit side because of the embedded energy in the equipment. The comment that was made by another one of the people here was that we're throwing stuff away that's not worn out yet. There's an energy cost of that. There's an energy cost that goes all the way back to the mining of the stuff that goes into these things. There's an energy cost that goes all the way back to the fossil fuels used by Xcel Energy. There is an energy cost of the people who have to work on this stuff in order to bring it up to a code that's got so much ambiguity in it that we're already talking about variances. So I think it's really necessary to really be considering whether or not those embedded costs are really being thought of, not only in terms of dollars, but in terms of energy, in terms of emissions. I think I sent an email earlier to the council saying that there are a number of typos in the existing document. Now, they're fairly simple typos. One of them is a reference to parking garages that then is suddenly lost in the ether. It's just gone. It's not there. The other one, though, is more important, and that's the small office buildings. Small office buildings show a greater than sign in front of 5,000 square feet, and then has two more numbers for office buildings larger than 5,000 square feet. Which one applies? We don't know. That line for small business, small offices ought to be taken out entirely. Cost, affordability, incomplete analysis, especially with multifamily. I'm trying to figure out how the metering works for multifamily. Are you metering each individual unit? Are you going to intrude on what those people are using? Are you going to be using that data to figure out who's there and who's not? Is it public record? Is it not public record? These things ought to be nailed down. The public records questions in this whole thing are huge, not only for the businesses, but also for residents. Why do I care about residents as a downtown association? Because we were looking at doing a residential building in Delo. So finally, in summary, I think you really need to get together with the regional cohort. I think that the items that were mentioned here as far as availability of materials are tremendously important, and embedded energy is too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Sheets.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the comments that we've had from the previous speakers because they're right on. I know as a developer in various jurisdictions across the city right now, we can't get electrical panels, we can't get glass right now. We're redoing the Kohl's building in Louisville right now. Our glass is 4 months out right now. I had to order glass from Mexico for a project in Parker. So these delays are real. We can't get a 600 amp panel. If there's a 6-month delay on a 600 amp panel. So part of what I'm hearing this evening, it seems like we're passing an ordinance and then we're trying to figure out what's inside it. We've heard that before. Since the last public hearing, there's been very little communication, at least with the development community. I would have appreciated some additional workshops. Maybe we could have worked through some of the issues that we've had. I think that would have been beneficial. I read the staff report. It said that there's 13 of 65 Colorado jurisdictions that have adopted the 2021 IECC. That's 20%. You're in the top 20% right now. You're in the front of the pack. The 2021 IEC is a comprehensive document, and it's filled with new requirements. And I'm not sure we fully tested it yet because we haven't built a new building. There's a host of new requirements in there, and I have no idea what that's going to cost us. There's a fundamental flaw in the consultant's financial analysis, which is not easily overcome. Once a building has been constructed and a tenant takes occupancy, the tenant pays 100% of the operating costs. Additional requirements will ultimately result in higher lease rates for the tenant because of the upfront costs. Developer payback based on energy savings, for example, will flow to the tenant instead of compensating the developer for installing higher priced, more efficient infrastructure. The consultant has errantly allocated this future savings to the developer. It's not accurate. This is the fundamental nature of leased commercial real estate. They're triple net leases. It's how it works. Unless you're going to change the whole industry, it's a flawed assumption. I believe this adoption will make Louisville less competitive and not more competitive. Those interested in building in Boulder County will go to neighboring municipalities. The buildings will still be built, they just won't be in Louisville. Within the new requirements, I looked, Rob, that tenant finish is called out, and I read it closely, and I know that I've heard from building officials that they say it's just new construction, but I don't see that written anywhere. So maybe that's a correction that needs to be made right now. But to change those HVAC units on the example of a 100,000 square foot building.
Thank you, Mr. Sheets. We'll have another round of public comment, and you can keep going then, but your 3 minutes is up. Next, we have Tiffany Boyd.
Good evening, Tiffany Boyd, 550 Grant Avenue. Just want to address a few of the things that have been brought up so far. So first of all, about the roadmap and about the cohort. So the roadmap does not have the teeth that your individual decisions as a council will have. The roadmap compliance suggestions, and waiting for the cohort for another year is just the inevitable changes that are going to be happening statewide anyway. Benchmarking is coming. There are so many things. I mean, 12 months is a very short amount of time, and this idea, just respectfully, the kicking the can down the road and waiting for 12 months, we will still have supply chain issues for all of these things that they're mentioning that aren't available. We will still, all of these issues will still be there. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is that Louisville has been a mentor community. There's a lot that this community and all of you sitting there have to be proud of because of your leadership with the residential codes. There are more people talking about building codes than ever before, not just in Boulder County, but around the state, because of your mentorship and because of that leadership. This is coming. This is inevitable. All of the benchmarking and all of the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions for commercial buildings is coming. We need to really remember this is new construction. When someone commented that all of these empty spaces in Louisville are worried, this has nothing to do with existing spaces. This is new construction, and we really need to stay focused on that. You know, I mean, this is a wonderful discussion, and we're bringing out all these sides. This reminds me of COP27. So the COP27 just finished in Egypt, the Council of the Parties on Climate Change for our world, and there were about 690 representatives from the oil and gas community at COP27 because they want to slow things down. They want to kick the can down the road. They don't want the inevitable to happen that we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So there are a number of things to be proud of that what we've done in residential codes. The inevitability of commercial codes is coming anyway, whether it comes tonight with your hopeful yes vote or it comes with the cohort, it's coming, and there will still be issues. Somebody mentioned the business community needs to lead, codes don't need to lead. Well, that's just another story of kicking the can down the road. Putting stringent greenhouse gas emission codes into place is climate action. Putting those codes into place is climate action, full stop.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tess Weltzine.
Hi, my name is Tess Weltzine. I live at 2869 Shoshone Trail. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me and for serving our town. I'm here today once again to talk about climate change. It seems like I've been having to do that a lot recently, and it is because this issue is only going to get worse, and immediate action we need to be taking must be implemented now. I completely understand and respect the other views of the constituents. I just hope you guys can understand what it's like to be a youth growing up in this climate crisis and take that into your decision as well. The constant threat of climate change that hangs over my generation's head has become normal. It's normal for my first thought every time I get asked what I want to do when I grow up is to be, will our world be in a state where I can even try and have a future? I know it's normal for me. It's now normal for me to hear the wind outside my house and to get hit with immense anxiety. And when I see the dry, brittle grass that covers Louisville's open space swaying in the wind. This has not just become my new normal and my generation's new normal. This is our world's new normal. The city building codes for new commercial construction in Louisville is the next step in the future of sustainable infrastructure that our town needs. These codes will only apply to multifamily dwellings, office buildings, schools, and warehouses, paving the path towards energy efficiency. Not only do they incentivize all-electric commercial construction, but they align closely with the City of Boulder's current ones and the City of Denver's soon-to-be-adopted ones. Strengthening building codes is one of the most robust actions that a city in Louisville can take to reduce its future greenhouse gas emissions. And I know one thing, that this is necessary. As leaders, we need you to take this action. My future needs you to take this action. Louisville's air, open space, and water needs you to take this action. It's not just my generation that is being given this dying planet. Climate change impacts everyone, and yet the youth voices are the ones standing out the most. We dedicate our energy to this crisis instead of being normal teenagers. Can I ask you to do the same? Can you dedicate your energy towards this issue so we can systemically change our ways? Can I ask you to dedicate your energy to divest from fossil fuels so we are no longer contributing to the deadly temperature increase? Local action is what we need, change where we can control it. With the power to create this change, to give our town hope, and to make the next step in the right direction, I'm calling on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Alana Diddams.
Hello, my name is Alana Diddams. I live at 440 West Sycamore Court, and I urge you to vote yes on stronger commercial building codes. This ordinance directly supports Louisville's goal in the 2020 Sustainability Action Plan to adopt new building codes and policies that promote energy efficiency in new and existing buildings. We know that commercial residential buildings are two of the primary sources of greenhouse gas emissions in Louisville, and we've already taken a great step to reduce emissions with residential buildings. So now it's clearly time to take this step for commercial buildings. I just had my first semester of college, and coming back, even in the first few days I've been back here, it's been such a great reminder of how much I'd love to come back and live in Louisville when I'm older. But I'm concerned that I won't be able to have the chance to because of climate change-induced natural disasters and the ongoing drought, all of which come back to carbon emissions. Voting against this ordinance would be a step entirely in the wrong direction. It would be a vote against the Sustainability Action Plan, a vote against the Net Zero Roadmap, and against future generations in Louisville. So once again, I implore you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us over to council discussion. Any council discussion on the topic this evening? So I'm the presiding officer, and we've already had an issue with Zoom tonight, and so I've explained to people that they need to come in. So we're not going to spend another 10 minutes trying to fix the problem. It's done for the evening. I guess City Attorney Kelly, can we take a 5-minute recess so you can look at the rules to determine who determines if we're going to use the online system?
I'd be happy to take a look at the rules.
Thanks. We'll take a 5-minute recess. right, it looks like we can get back to it. Thank you, everyone. We'll resume the hearing. City Attorney Kelly, can you help us with what we're to do in this situation?
Hopefully. Okay, in the City Council's Rules of Procedure in Section 4H, electronic participation is addressed. And as the mayor stated, the rules do provide if it's not feasible due to technological or other reasons, the in-person meeting shall continue if a quorum is present when there are issues with the electronic participation. There's a couple of other sections that I think also may be relevant to resolving any issues tonight. And that is in section 6B. It says that the chair has the reasonable discretion in the application of the procedures involved with meeting procedure, subject to section 7A. And what 7A tells us is that the chair determines all points of order. This is under parliamentary procedure in the rules, subject to the rights of any member of the council to appeal to the council, in which case the point of order shall be resolved by a vote of the majority of the members of the council present.
Great.
So I hope that's helpful.
I think it's helpful. Is it helpful to everyone? Are you signaling that you, Councilmember Lay?
Just, I'm waiting for what the ruling is going to be and on what.
Oh, so at the very beginning of the meeting, the electronic participation broke, and I made it clear at that time that people would need to come in to participate. Mr. Dino was online at the beginning of the meeting. He came in and participated, and it's really, I mean, there are several people on both sides of the issue that have had their hands up, but we're not going to continue to mess around with the electronic participation once it's broken. It's that, I mean, that was declared at the very onset of the meeting.
Is that the ruling?
I mean, that is what I've already said.
Okay. I'm gonna move to override that reason because it is feasible to ask. The Zoom is up and running. You've got two people, looks like at least two people, and both of whom are fire survivors, so
if
they're
you'll
not
make
here.
if you'll
Can
make
I
a point
please
of
be
order-
heard?
Sure, I'm just trying to make your motion correct, so if you'll just make a point of order, that would be great.
If you'd like me to cast it as a point of order, I'll ask it as a point of order. Point of order, we should override that ruling because it's feasible and we are going to disenfranchise people who deserve to be heard. And it's ridiculous that we're doing that.
Great, is there a second?
It's irrational.
I'll second that.
Thanks, any discussion on the point? I'll just say, so at the very onset, I made the statement, and so there are several people that have had their hands up at any point in time that have left or been gone, and so I don't think it creates an equal playing field for everyone after the statement had already been made. So I hope you join me in voting against the point of order, but I understand the various perspective. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, the motion carries. So we will spend time trying to take electronic comment for anyone who put their hand down. Please re-raise your hand and we will try to take electronic comment again. And if it fails, I guess we'll just sit there listening to nothing. First in the queue, we have Larry Donner.
Yes, my name is Larry Donner. I am rebuilding my house at 1020 Willow Place. I'd like to say, after successfully losing businesses like Medtronics, Kohl's, and Lowe's, Council is looking to ensure that buildings available for repurposing will remain vacant for years to come. The legacy you leave will be one of a continued loss of businesses and a reduction in Louisville's long-term viability as a community. I'd just like to point out the first step in long-term survival and sustainability is short-term survival. And I believe these codes are premature and you need to take the time to study them to see what the impact will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Susan Liu.
Okay, can you hear me? Larry, what am I doing wrong?
We can hear you.
Larry. Oh, okay. This is Susan Liu from 1020 Willow Place. And I would like to say, previous city cost estimates have been grotesquely wrong. I can't speak to commercial, but I can speak to residential, and I think there's some analogy there. The residential estimates for net zero, when you were doing the studies in the spring, were pegged at $20,000 to $40,000. My neighbors and I are trying to rebuild, and some of us are trying to do 2021 net zero. It's coming in consistently for all of us at somewhere between $75,000 to $100,000 extra. That's a far cry from what you were telling people in the spring. And yes, rebates exist, but they in no way cover the cost. And you have to spend your own money first. Apply, and you don't know if you're really going to get anything back. And, so are you a mentor to the rest of the region? Are you an example? Yes, you are an example. And everyone, you've got politicians from other communities sniggering behind their backs at you, snickering, because you have become an example of what not to do. You would not believe the number of people who are going, okay, we don't want to do what Louisville's doing. And to say that, well, Erie's adopted this is not correct. Erie adopted 2021, but they adopted it only as electric ready. So if you all don't dig into the details of what people are adopting, you can't take at face value, oh yeah, those people adopted it. You have to dig into the details. And in this evening, you haven't done that, and you owe it to all of us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to apologize to all the other folks who had their hands up that are no longer with us. Any council discussion on the topic this evening? Councilmember Dickinson.
I just noticed that one of the people who had their hands up has become present. I know how interested you were in.
Sure, so we've now ended the public comment period. We will have another one. So any new hands that come up at this point we'll take in the next round of public comment.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of questions and comments on the staff report. The first thing is, I guess this is page 5 of the staff report. There's a table there showing the cost, and the right column is annual cost savings after PV. Is that in present value, or is that nominal dollars? So the annual cost savings after PV, is that in present value dollars, or is that in nominal dollars?
That's in nominal dollars, I believe.
Thank you. And then I had a question on the regional cohort. I know there's a number of things going on with that, but there's also state legislation that was mentioned as part of that. Could you speak specifically to that and how the cohort is looking at what potential legislation will be entertained and passed during the session?
I'm going to invite Christine Brinker up to talk about the state legislation.
Sure, thanks. So the cohort process started before the state legislation was drafted or presented or adopted. Once it became clear that that legislation was moving forward, we made sure to calibrate what the cohort was recommending against what was in the state legislation to make sure that the cohort recommendations would most likely at least meet, if not exceed, what's in the legislation. There are a few details waiting to be determined on the state legislation because the exact wording is up to an energy code board that is meeting as we speak. But the state legislation itself says that any local code adoptions after July 1st of this coming year have to include at least the 2021 IECC plus solar ready, EV ready, and electric ready. Within those, the electric ready in the state legislation is quite detailed. The EV ready and the solar ready are what the Energy Code Board is determining. Solar ready will probably just be the appendix that's already in the Energy Code. So really EV ready is the most variable within what we're still expecting to see. That there is the question mark, but we do expect that the language that the cohort has will meet or exceed what will be required by the state legislation come July 1st. Did that answer the question?
That's a great answer. I have a follow-up question to it, of course. Talking about in early 2023, the cohort's going to come out with a report. What does early mean? Is that in the first quarter? Is that what we're looking at? I'm seeing nodding yes over here. So in that report, will that address what I hate to say guess, but what we know about those state laws? Will that be included as part of the report? I know it won't be finalized by then, and certainly won't be finalized or signed by the governor in the first quarter, but will that be noted in that report?
There are a lot of question marks. What we know for what's required for all adoptions starting July 1st is really clear. The 2021 plus EV ready, solar ready, and electric ready. What is unclear is, first of all, the roadmap, which, as was pointed out, is not written in law, but is more of a guideline that the communities will follow, a roadmap. The other question mark is what will be required of local governments by state law starting July 1st, 2026. Because July 1st, 2026 is when the stricter state law kicks in, and that's called the Low Energy and Carbon Code. That one is a big question mark. And so we're still waiting to see how the roadmap calibrates against a future low energy and carbon code. We do know that the low energy and carbon code has to be based on either the 2021 IECC or the 2024 IECC, whichever is stricter for energy efficiency. The 2024 obviously isn't out yet, so we don't know which will be stricter.
Thank you very much. My next questions are actually for other folks. So, Director Caro, one of the things you mentioned in your presentation and I didn't quite understand, you were talking about a heat pump backup, and I wasn't sure what the context of that comment was.
Right, so within our electric space and water heating standards that we've drafted, there are restrictions on electric resistance coils also, saying really they're not allowed for space heating or water heating, but then there's several exceptions for those as well. So for example, a heat pump water heating system, let me restate it, a heat pump space heating system that's outside and it's taking in the air and exchanging that. When it gets to a certain low temperature, it won't function well. And so sometimes you need electric coil resistance to back that system up. That's if anybody wants to jump in on that.
No,
Yeah.
I think I get it because
Okay.
I have a heat pump and it's not going to work on Thursday.
Right. So you probably have a backup
I have a
gas or
backup
electric.
system, yes. So thank you. I just wasn't sure the context of that. And maybe this question's for you or maybe Kayla, I'm not sure, but I know that Erie recently passed some energy code things, but it seemed like, and this is, I don't really know what they passed, so I'm hoping you know, something that it was ready or was capable, and could you shed light on what they did?
Hope and I were both there at the Erie adoption, so we can explain further. They adopted the 2021 IECC for both residential and commercial. They adopted the full suite of building codes, mechanical code, plumbing code, building code, residential code, et cetera, including the energy code. So the 2021 energy code plus the additional supporting amendments as recommended by the cohort, and those include expanded solar ready. Expanded meaning that it applies to all multifamily buildings, not just multifamily buildings of a certain size. It includes EV ready language, and that is where you heard the discussion about ready versus capable versus installed. That was in the EV ready section. And then they passed the cohort recommendations of electric preferred. And so that is right in between electric ready, which is just the wiring and the electrical infrastructure to be able to plug in a future heat pump or heat pump water heater on the one hand, and all electric requirements on the other. It's right in the middle, and it says that you have the choice of either all electric, or if you do put in gas, you have to add in extra efficiency.
So with I mean, if you build a building that has a 50-year life, for example, that heating system's not going to last 50 years. So the next generation, then they would have to go with electric. Is that what would happen? No?
No, it would default back to how the codes, how the energy code has been for quite a number of cycles, which is that you only have to bring something up to code if you touch it. If your heating system goes out, then the new heating system that you have to get typically has to go up to the new code level. Although in your adoption here, as we were just discussing, replacement systems, so your heating system goes out and you need a new one for commercial, it would default you back to the base code, not the more aggressive all-electric space and water heating requirements. Those are only for new buildings.
And if I could just add the electric, so our code that we've already adopted has electric ready, and what that means is you have to size your panel, and you have to provide conduit and infrastructure so that if somebody does replace a system, it's easier. We're removing barriers to them replacing in the future natural gas powered systems with electric. So that's what electric ready means. The building's already ready to accept that electric infrastructure when they choose to swap it out themselves, or maybe a future code we might require they swap it out when they replace it.
Right. So, I mean, and the capable would just basically be the conduit?
So if you're talking about EV charging, so when we do, I'm sorry, did I say, I meant electric, all electric ready. EV we have 3 categories. So it's installed, ready, and capable.
Right.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with that is just EV charging, for example, there's grades of that as well, right? I could use my 120 or 220 or even 440 if you're doing fast charging. What I'm wondering, if you do ready and it's 20 years down the road, why would you require ready if you don't know what the infrastructure is going to be to support that next generation or several generations later of equipment? Whereas the capable, as we understand it, that's the conduit infrastructure, maybe the panel as well, I don't know. But this is a minor detail for this discussion. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to bring us back to the ordinance. I think we've had a lot of talk about the cohort, what Erie's doing, and while I appreciate the focus on what other municipalities may be doing, I think it's important to understand what's actually in the ordinance. My sense is that there are a lot of exceptions in this ordinance. I think we've been very, so what I'm kind of struggling with is some of the uncertainty that I've heard from some of the commenters this evening. Because to me, it seems pretty clear what this applies to and what it doesn't. And so I'm going to ask staff one more time. This is new construction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If it, based on what one of our consultants has said, even if you're talking about changes or updates to an existing structure, It is only the portions and things that you touch that are required to meet this code. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
With some caveats that, you know, what was said about the base code versus this code, which is only for new construction. So I think if we're going to have a conversation about this particular ordinance, I'd like to get beyond some of the discussion about, you know, process. You know, we've followed all of our appropriate processes. There have been a large amount of opportunity to comment on this session. We've had a first reading. We've had, you know, direction meetings. We have talked about this prior to this, you know, in meetings. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the stakeholder meetings that the staff has done over the last year?
Sure. We held 2 public open house meetings.
Okay.
And we also engaged with the Sustainability Advisory Board and the Building Code Board of Appeals and had discussions on a couple of occasions related to the report and the code.
Right. And wasn't this discussed at the last EVC meeting as well?
I don't believe, no, it wasn't on the agenda. This review of this ordinance wasn't on the agenda. There were public comments at the EVC meeting, though, about the code.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'd just like to add, in addition to that public engagement, we had an online survey that had different questions for developers, business owners, and residents that was open from June until August.
And can you tell me, as staff has been drafting this ordinance, how have you gone about either addressing or not addressing certain comments that you've gotten from the community? Where have you made changes to either your drafts, your outlines, your thought process as a result of discussions with the community?
Mm-hmm. You know, I'd say there was some input, business community input on the exceptions for the space and water heating that we took into consideration as we were drafting the ordinance. I don't think there was anything explicit on the EUI as we were drafting that, but the space and water heating.
Okay. And are there any businesses in this code proposed that would be specifically unable to operate in Louisville because of the passage of this code that you're aware of?
I don't know. I don't know that I could speak to that. I think there's such a broad, you know, range of types of busebuses and technical requirements.
Let me give you a specific example then. Could a hospital operate under this particular code? Seeing nodding from your consultants behind you, by the way.
Well, I don't want to disagree with them.
Could a restaurant operate under this code?
Right. So to try to answer your first question, the EUI does not include hospitals, so they'd go under the 2021 base code.
Right.
And then we did have very specific exceptions that we think would cover hospital uses for the space and water heating. So we did take that into consideration.
I appreciate that.
Yes, I think restaurants could operate under the code.
Okay. Okay, I'll stop there. I appreciate your comments and answering those questions.
Is there any other council discussion? Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, in terms of, let's talk a little bit more about the public engagement. In terms of getting businesses to provide specific input, have there been any roundtables at which you've invited businesses from Louisville to participate, specifically going through the version of the code that you've provided tonight?
No, we didn't have a public input or open house or roundtable about the code as drafted.
Let me ask you if, you know, one of the things that has been discussed is, I mean, we have look back at the commitment that we've got through Resolution 25, Series 2, 2019, which was really four parts. One, meeting all of Louisville's municipal electric needs with 100% carbon-free sources by 2025. Two, reduce core municipal greenhouse gas emissions annually below 2016 baseline through 2025. Three, generate 75% of Louisville's residential and commercial/industrial electric needs from carbon-free sources by 2030. And the last one is reducing core community greenhouse gas emissions annually below the 2016 baseline through 2030. And all of us support those. And I certainly do, and I know everybody else on this council does. And it's really a question of kind of the means we use to get there and the timing of it. I think to the extent that people disagree that there's anybody suggests that we're not in agreement on the goal is out in left field. The question is, when you get a question from a business that is maybe seeking to move here, how confident are you in, for example, the estimates of costs that you have provided to us as a way of helping the business to understand what it's looking at in terms of the cost of building and operating here in Louisville?
So I think the cost estimating that we did, again, was for a very specific, set of assumptions, just using the office building, for example. I think if a new commercial property, a new commercial project was coming into the city, we would typically engage with them with what our code requirements are. We typically don't suggest what it's going to cost. We don't get into those types of discussions. We would expect that would be really part of something they would work out with their engineering staff and their consultants on what the costs may be. I don't think I would suggest any cost to them at all. I don't think I have enough information, or we haven't done enough study and modeling to suggest that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other council discussion? Members of the public care to comment? This is your final comment period on this topic. Mr. Sheets?
Thank you. Jeff Sheets again with Coble and Company. A couple comments as I've listened to the discussion. First of all, we're not, as developers, we're not wholly opposed to what you're proposing. It's just that we take a bit more of a pragmatic approach to what you're doing. We would look for contractors to cost out these different pieces a little more than a consultant, a third party that comes through and gives us costs on estimate and installation and tells us what those numbers are going to be. And then we would vet that with them. We would probably vet 2 or 3 contractors and find out who's the best contractor. Relative to stakeholder meetings, we had 2 early stakeholder meetings. I attended both of those, the presentations. They were well done. The consultants presented the program well. I will tell you, it was early on for me. I didn't fully understand what was happening with this, but we've had no contact since that period. I think it would be beneficial for the commercial developers and owners to sit down with staff and consultants and work through a program and work through these different options and find out what do they actually cost and what are the ramifications to our buildings. Is it something that's achievable? I think that we can take a measured approach to this and we don't have to knee-jerk it. I know that there are some that believe that we have to do something right now, the sky's falling. I'm not in that camp. I think we can take something and we can get through it in the first quarter, the second quarter of next year, and we can figure out, and we can put accurate numbers on this, and we can figure out what this really will cost. And will it cost business for Louisville? When you talk about a restaurant costing 47% more for their HVAC, that is a big number. I've done a lot of restaurants. Usually you're $200 or $300 a foot in tenant finish for restaurants. And so you throw that number on top of it, that's huge. So I do believe a collective group of owners and staff with consultants can work through this in a reasonable pace and implement some additional requirements. Um, you know, I was talking to someone earlier today. We use all electric water heaters. We don't use any gas water heaters. In an office building and in retail projects, we don't want to vent them. It's a pain in the butt. So, you know, that's something we're already doing. On larger commercial, industrial kind of projects, they do use gas-fired burners. So that's something we'll have to work through. But I would ask council to just weigh through the pros and cons here and weigh what you're really doing. I think we're ahead of it a little bit. You're like I said earlier, you're in the top 20% right now. I don't think you have to be the leader in this. We can look for the cohorts. And I think if you would weigh what's happening, you've got a constituency out there that relies on tax base, which is new business and development. And I think we can bring that forward. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Tamar Krantz.
Hi, my name's Tamar Krantz. I live at 691 West Street. I just want to say that I am really impressed. I'm impressed by the consultant reports that were in the city council packet, and I really appreciate the amount of work and analysis by our staff that is recommending approval of this ordinance to strengthen our energy code. And I'm really proud to learn that we are a mentor community in this regional cohort. And it makes me really happy to know that our staff person, Kayla, can go in there and make a, you know, can add value and help other communities in developing their codes. I don't think it's a bad thing if we're a year ahead. I think it's great, and I don't want our commitments to reduce greenhouse gases that are in our sustainability action plan to just sit on the shelf. I'm really happy that we're implementing, and it seems like this has been something that's been in the work for a while. I just wanted to say that I know I heard some of my fellow residents say that this is going to drive businesses away from Louisville, but I believe the opposite is going to happen. My gas bill at home went up by 150%, and I would be really happy if I were a tenant looking for space to move into a place that had better energy efficiency or was all electric at this point. And especially with rising fossil fuel prices. And I also think that there might be some misinformation out there among some of the fellow residents who say that they might be throwing away thousands of pounds of refrigeration equipment. I think, if I'm hearing this correctly, this is going to apply to new construction and tenant finishes when they can't operate with the existing HVAC systems or existing infrastructure. So I don't think that I don't want everybody to fear that this is gonna result in like thousands of pounds of equipment going into the trash. So just please push this across the finish line. It seems like you've done great work, and I'm really proud to hear everything that our city's doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh Cooperman.
Josh Cooperman, I live at 216 Griffith Street. I strongly support the amendments to Louisville's commercial building codes that you are currently considering. As you can certainly guess, my primary reason for supporting them is the reduction in future greenhouse gas emissions that they will bring to Louisville. And I think that, as we all know, mitigating climate change is absolutely urgent. I just want to mention a few things which haven't come up yet and which I think bear on some of the comments that have been made. So first of all, I'm not an expert, but as I understand, the city of Boulder has had a code like this for commercial buildings for a good number of years, and that in fact, the numbers for EUI that are in our code are basically identical to what the city of Boulder has been using. So, you know, I don't particularly know about construction in Boulder or whatever, but, there seems to be plenty of it, and they don't seem to be, the codes don't seem to be stifling that. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention is that is a few things that have come before the Planning Commission, but not yet before City Council. First of all is Red Tail Ridge. So at the Planning Commission, the developer offered to build their buildings to a higher standard than our current codes, as they did previously. They seem not to have, I'm sure they did that in part because they want to get their project through, but, they believe that they can build to codes that are beyond what we already have, clearly. At the last, so, that's a large project, and some of the projects in Boulder are also large projects. And in Louisville, we don't have so many projects like that. But last time, at just the last Planning Commission meeting, there were 2 applications for new buildings at the CTC. As far as I understood from the applicant presentations, both of those buildings will exceed our current codes. They didn't go into the details of how exactly they will exceed them, but they both said that they would exceed them. I don't know how it lines up with what you're considering at the moment, but clearly there is the ability and the desire in Louisville to build buildings to higher standards than what we are considering at the moment. So I don't think that this, based on that information at least, I don't think that the codes you're considering right now are a stretch. And I actually think it's a timely course of action to enact them tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sherry Summer.
Sherry, we can't hear you on your end. Her microphone doesn't seem to be working.
If we're waiting, can we start a timer at least for?
I started it at
Okay,
8:24.
thank you.
I'm just waiting until the 3 minutes is up per council direction. Thank you for your comments. Any other members of the public care to comment? Mr. Cron?
Thank you, Mayor Rick Crone, 746 West Fir Court. First, I'd like to mention the housing availability question, or affordability question, which I realized one of the graphics mentioned that apparently there is a possibility of a lower cost. However, frankly, I don't believe it, partly because I don't believe the monitoring costs were included in those costs, which, as you heard, were a major concern. I'm also not convinced that heat pump water heating inside individual units, which seems to be a feature of the code, is going to be practical, partly because of the size requirements for the room they have to be in. Someone had mentioned the page 5 table. I'd like to point out that the shortest payback period on that table is well over 40 years if you actually divide the annual energy savings into the amount that it costs to put in those items. And the longest one is over 2,000 years, which is rather astonishing that that even made it into the table. Now, you're not doing that, which is a good thing, but recognize that I think those numbers may be kind of a bit questionable. Let's see, there was a mention that any new code adoptions must include the 2021 IEEC under the proposed state law. Well, that's fine, but does that mean that rural communities in particular aren't going to adopt any new energy code for years? Because if they do, they have to do this. And I suspect that could be a problem. And I don't know if that'll survive the legislature or not. Regarding the public input process, frankly, I think you didn't do too bad a job overall. However, I found it extremely difficult as a volunteer in the position that I'm in to be able to respond competently on Tuesday when you do not get the draft of the code until Friday afternoon. That just doesn't make any sense at all because you've had plenty of time to put that together, and yet it's not released to the public, and I asked for it several times. So I'm a little bit upset about that. I don't think public hearings on Tuesday of the holiday week are a good idea. I don't think the first reading on the day after the long Labor Day weekend was a particularly good idea, but that's all water under the bridge. You asked whether anybody's unable to operate, and I think greenhouses, a new greenhouse would be unable to operate without a variance. I don't know whether that's going to be liberally granted, which should be stated in the code, or not. Otherwise, they're not going to come in here. And of course, we have fine fantasy orchids. We do have greenhouses as a possibility. We have one right now. There's no reason to think we can't get more. Do you know why Fantasy Greenhouse came here? I actually talked to them once about this. It's the water. We apparently have far better water for orchid production than practically any place else in the country.
And just so you know, the city clerk started your timer about a minute late.
Oh, well, thank you very much. The businesses that can afford it most likely will do this voluntarily. I think that's what you're hearing on the Red Tail Ridge and the other comments that were made earlier. So I don't think that they necessarily need the coercion of the code in order to be able to do it. And I think I will concede any time that I have left to anyone who wants to use it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public care to comment? Ms. Boyd.
Hi, Tiffany Boyd, 550 Grant Avenue. Thank you, Council, for your time and dedication and patience on this really important topic. I just wanted to reiterate and speak again to the inevitability of all these changes that are going to be happening in the very near future, not just at the state level, but at the national level, because we are in a climate crisis. So we are moving, and we have this opportunity to do things at a local level to really move the needle in a direction that we are going anyway. Retrofitting of residential and commercial buildings is coming, and it's coming quickly. And this code that you have a chance to vote yes on tonight will save new businesses money because they won't have to retrofit when retrofits become required. So you have an opportunity to stay ahead right now of the money-saving capabilities of these new businesses. We're talking about new construction. This new construction will not have to do as many retrofits when they're coming, because they're coming. And so benchmarking is coming soon. All of these things they're talking about with supply chain, it's true, right? But code has a chance to push industry. Code has a chance to push manufacturing of more of these things that we need in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And I think because we've been a mentor community, we need to keep our eye on the fact that the retrofitting is coming and we can stay ahead of that curve. And thank you again for your commitment to our community and for listening to so many public comments this evening. Thanks.
Thank you. I guess I'll ask for a 2-minute recess so I can ask Mayor Pro Tem Maloney a question on his opinion. Okay, thanks. I just conferred with Mayor Pro Tem Maloney about a rules question of whether we've already given a fair effort to the member of the public to try to comment several times, and if he thought we ought to again or not. And we concluded that we have given it a real go. So we're going to continue to move on. Any other members of the public care to comment? All right. Seeing none, that ends our public comment, and I'll close the public hearing and ask council for any discussion or action. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have one statement I think I need to make, and that is that coming up with this code the way it is involved some compromise at that former council meeting. And I think that we came up with a very good compromise on how to promote sustainable building in new construction. So we did limit it to new construction only. We did eliminate the requirement for hospitals and for restaurants and a couple other uses. And in the meantime, now since we've done that, the state has come out saying that they are going to be putting very nearly these requirements in place the 1st of June. That's only 6 months away. And the cohorts are in the process of doing something just for the area that may be even stricter than what the state is coming down with. And so I am in favor and will, I guess, make a motion to approve ordinance number 1845, series 2022.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Well, I appreciate the motion made by my colleague. What we did was created from the dais when we made that concession, compromise, whatever we call it. I'm struck by the information provided by staff that I want more information. And as I look at the things that are going on, what you mentioned, the cohort process, I think is very important to us. But before I go there, one of the things mentioned by Councilor Lay early in this meeting is all of the members of council support the sustainability goals. That needs to be really clear. And I support those. And no one should question anyone on council about that. For me, it's a matter of process and timing that's important. And we've articulated those goals. And whatever we do, I think we need to maintain a sense of urgency, but many people have testified about. It's not okay to kick the can down the road, as I heard a few different people say, to 2024 or 2025. But I do think it's important to understand what's going on at the state, what's going on with the cohorts, so we do something, and we can provide leadership in that. We've been called a mentor. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but we have been ahead of the curve. It's been mentioned, we're in the, I don't know what the top 20% means, but we're an early adopter of the 2021 code. But I believe in process, which I've said on a lot of topics here. And as a number of the businesses have testified, we really didn't have public and business comment on this before it was actually created. And does it make sense? I think it does make sense. So I'm going to offer a substitute motion that we table this until date uncertain, but I also think it's important that we take action in the first or second quarter of 2023. Once we have the cohort reports, that'll give us more information, more data to be able to base the decision on. So I offer that up as a substitute motion.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Lay.
A couple of things, I guess, that I would speak to. I might suggest that a date certain would be worthwhile to include, but I think what I want to say a couple of things. First, we agree that we have a serious and urgent climate change problem, and that it's not something that we can kick down the road. It's not something that should be delayed indefinitely. I think it could be considered purposely. We ought to think carefully about how we make a final decision on this. We all agree on the sustainability goals that I read a little bit earlier. And those are more specific to Louisville. We agree, I think, on the cohort process, in which a group of communities in the region are trying to work together to establish standards that, consistent with their own communities, their own charters and rules, fit their communities. To me, I like it for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's an opportunity, as we've heard tonight, to influence one another, and that's happened. We've gotten mentor status, so that's kind of a good thing, and that's been helpful, I think, and it's gotten people excited, and that's a good partial result. It's not the end, it's not an achievement that's an end in itself, but it certainly is a good thing. And we've gotten information out of it, and we've gotten, I think, certainly some expertise to help guide us, because I'm not an expert in this, and I'm not sure anybody on council would say they're an expert in it. There might be, but I'm not going to claim that for myself. It's really important to be relying on the experts in this stuff, and it's important. I think the experts include all of the stakeholders that we're dealing with, including the residents and the businesses and the consultants that we've had working on these issues. The other part of it that I like is the fact that with the cohort, you don't have, or you help to guard against the issue of one community being able to hold off and wait for all the other communities to raise their standards to a certain level, and then pitch to businesses that they're a lot easier to do business with, and try to swing people that way. And I think that's a great function. It's sort of a, if you will, a negative function maybe, as opposed to a positive one. It's to prevent that from happening. And I think that's a really good thing too. I'm struggling with a couple of pieces, and this one of them has to do with public process. I think we've heard about the public process that we've had, and we've had some good input, and we've had, but we haven't had a lot of input on this particular version of the ordinance. It's a second reading. This is the first public hearing on this ordinance. It's the first opportunity that the public has had to digest a really important piece of legislation and to poke at it. There's some things that are really good about it. There are things that I think we've heard tonight. People have real questions about, real uncertainty about. I think, for example, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think Mr. Crone sent an email to us that enumerated some of the concerns about provisions in the code. We haven't heard from a lot of other folks. I think as a matter of confidence in our community, that is, and I'm not just talking about confidence of the business community, I'm talking about the confidence of our citizens that we're actually making choices that are smart and that follow that cohort process. I just wonder whether we have done enough yet to get the impact, to do those roundtables. How long does it take to do a few roundtables to wrestle with some of these, to make this better? It's not a matter, I think it would be a shame to vote for or against tonight. I think it would be better to make it better based on the experts that we've got in our community, and not just the experts in business and so forth, but the combined assistance of consultants that we have, and answering the questions that I think 4 days of board packet or council packet existence, it just doesn't leave time for. I worry about that. So that's because I think what Councilmember Fahey said, I appreciate the idea about compromise. There were some discussions early on the direction about some compromise, and that's good. But I don't think, that's between us. That is not with public input. The public input was mostly, on this, it was only what we heard tonight and what we've gotten in the last few days as comments on the packet. So that uncertainty, I think we have it in our power to make that less certain, to build the confidence of the community. And that's why I think the substitute motion is a good thing. Is it something that's urgent enough for us to put on our work plan? Absolutely. Is it something that I would want to be doing in the first quarter? Yes. I don't think there's a question. I don't think we need to wait 6 months for that, but I think I would want to know from Mr. Zaccaro and perhaps the consultants what it might take to get a few of those kinds of roundtables together to provide that sort of input that would allow us to make changes that I think would make this a stronger and better and more, if you will, worthy piece of legislation for the other communities in the cohort to emulate. And what's the downside of that? What is the downside of that?
Director Zaccaro, I think that was a question for you.
Yeah.
So I would say going into next year, if we wanted to have a public input opportunity, we could certainly, do that in January. I think giving about 2 or 3 weeks notice for a public input opportunity is probably adequate. So if we put something out in early January, we could try to do something in late January for public input on the ordinance that's outside of this public hearing process.
If we did something like that, are you thinking that, based on what I suggested, one event is sufficient? Based on it's your professional opinion about public process in connection with ordinances of this magnitude and importance?
So I'd say what I would expect is, there's going to be some members of the community who are going to be against, any code change. Some might give constructive feedback. You know, there has to be a reasonable limit on how much public input you take on any issue. So it's really hard to say what's exactly the right amount of public input for any issue. But I think if council wants additional input from the business community, specifically on how this is drafted, that a minimum of one would certainly provide insight. If council wanted the business community to be able to provide input, and then have the city staff with their consultants have an opportunity to revise it and then have more input on the revision, because we wouldn't probably be revising it at the public meeting. That could be helpful, but I think it's really up to council, on how much public input. It could be one or two, could provide staff and the business community opportunities to make some incremental changes to the code.
Thanks, because that's helpful. I don't know what the right number is either. I think one is certainly appropriate. I think, if we had that plus another, we would have we could at the very least have a hearing, we have a reading on that revision, which I don't know whether we would be looking at having to do first and second reading on any revision. Do we have any sense of that?
Well, I think if you continued this to a date certain and there were maybe, some edits that were recommended, you could just continue this public hearing potentially. If there was a major rewrite or a completely different code, we'd probably want to renotice it.
Thanks. I think that's helpful. What I would suggest, let me make a friendly amendment, or a suggestion of a friendly amendment, which would be that we postpone, or what did you say? Did you say table? Yeah.
I used the term table.
That we table until the last council meeting in February.
Do you accept the friendly amendment?
Well, pending organization and holding of an event or a roundtable with the business community for purposes of commenting on the current version of the ordinance.
So just to check with the city clerk, so the last one scheduled then would be February 21st? So if it's February 21st, I accept the amendment.
Councilmember Most.
Yeah, I guess I'm actually a little confused because I think we have routinely modified all kinds of complex ordinances and made modifications on the fly and actually voted on them at the time. And I think we've been talking about this since, I think, October 2021 through different iterations and versions. And we've had what I would consider to be very reasonable public input. And one of my concerns is that I don't think we're going to move the needle on people who don't like this. I think we could continue having public hearings for a year, and I think people would be coming up with the same objections or new objections. And I think that the comments that we already have developers coming in that are exceeding the codes speaks to the fact that it's not a limiting factor. I also think at this point, having discussed this for so long and having, I think, significant public input again this evening, thinking about next year's work plan, we are so far behind because of the Marshall Fire. We have a long list of things we didn't get done this year that we were supposed to get done, and we have another, tough meeting ahead of us to try to prioritize for the community. We've had the city staff spend a lot of time and effort and energy on crafting the ordinance we have in front of us with some, I think, really good compromise that was added. And I certainly didn't get everything I think that we should have had, but I think that's part of the process. So I think the process is working. And yeah, from my perspective, to continue to keep this open when I have a very low confidence level that we're gonna get results that are any different, at a time when we have so many urgent matters before this city stacked up, would, from my perspective, not really be an effective use of our time, nor an effective use of staff's time. The other thing I will just quickly mention is I read an article recently in the New York Times, I think it was the New York Times, and I shared it with my fellow council members, about water issues in the Southwest, and I believe it's Nevada, Southern California, and Arizona. And for decades, they have understood that they have a water issue. And they have talked about it, and talked about it, and talked about it, and talked about it, and talked about it. And they have been unable to come to any consensus about how to solve the problem. So now the problem is, we're on the verge of the Hoover Dam shutting down, and the dams we have in place being a block to any water flowing down the Colorado below that. They now have a massive crisis that the federal government has had to step in to solve, because they have spent so much time talking and talking and talking and talking. And I don't think that this is perfect. I don't think any ordinance we've ever passed in this community is perfect. We routinely see land use applicants come before us and ask for waivers, ask for updates, ask for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th revisions to existing GDP amendments. I think that we are capable as a body, as we are the existing way that we are constituted, and going forward with modifications to this body to be able to handle any significant matters that come before us in regards to this particular ordinance, right? If there's exceptions, if there's waivers, we do this routinely. It's part of what we do. I don't think there's any perfect ordinance we've ever passed. So I understand the desire to have more engagement. I also believe we could have endless engagement on many, many, many issues. And I think that we always come to a point where we say, the public hearing is over, and my understanding is the public hearing is over, so we can't do a continuance on this ordinance. So now we're back, starting over with a new one. And maybe I'm incorrect, but my understanding is when we close the public hearing. So I just think it's really important to move forward. And if there are problems or imperfections or significant challenges for members of our business community, I have faith in this group of people that we will address those, as they come before us, just as we've done with many other things. So thank you for that. That's all I want to say.
Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to just comment quickly that we did hold 2 public forums concerning the building codes. I'm aware of that because I attended both of them. And that is where the amendments or changes to this ordinance came from, because that's when the business community said, we need to exempt hospitals, we need to exempt restaurants, we need to limit it to new construction. And all of those comments have been incorporated in the new ordinance proposal before us tonight. The other thing is, as Councilor Most just mentioned, none of our ordinances go through and are perfect. Everyone asks for a variance or some kind of condition. But we have the ability at any point after this ordinance passes to make amendments to it, to change little things, tweak it here and there, to make it more acceptable or more efficient, whatever, more effective in getting what we want in a way that assists the building community. The other issue is that while we're saying this is what we need you to do when you're building, we haven't said we won't give you some incentive in order to achieve this goal. And we can come up with, not necessarily financial, but, maybe we'll give you, less parking requirement or lot coverage or something like that. That won't cost the city anything, but will make the building cheaper to build or better functioning. And so I am in favor of passing this ordinance the way it is tonight with the possibility of making changes in the future.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to take a little step back on, I think there's one narrative that I want to make sure that we can be proud of. My understanding is we are the very, very, very first municipality in the state of Colorado to pass the 2021 IECC with EV ready and solar ready and electric preferred. And that's really cool. And I'm proud to be one of the members that voted for that. And I know this council, as Chris Lay was saying, we're proud of that stance. I think that's really important and signals kind of who we are, as that as quoted, a mentor and leader in in these codes. I am a little frustrated that we don't have a building that's been built to that code yet, but it does look optimistic that there are some permits coming in now, and obviously building a building takes a very long time. So, we passed the code in 2021. We haven't seen any buildings come and be built to that code yet, and to see the actual implications of the code we passed, right? So we've passed a code, 0 buildings built to it, and we're gonna change that code without knowing if it was good, bad, or otherwise. So I have a little hesitancy there. I would like to have worked more on incentives. Why isn't anyone building to our new farthest out their code in the state? Why aren't people building to it? I think people will come. They're going to be excited about it. We have the best code. We're showing an environmental first face. So where are all the buildings? Where's all the green building? And maybe we need to incentivize that. Maybe we need to help people build to that code, because maybe it is a little more expensive, and right now they can build 5 minutes away. And so I think that's why I'm excited about the cohort. I think to Tiffany Boyd's point, I think this is inevitable. And to Deb, your motion, this is probably coming 6 months from now either way. So I think what we do tonight, I'm a little less emotionally charged, because I think whatever we do tonight, whether we delay for 3 months or act tonight or delay for 6 months, I think it is inevitable. This is happening, and business owners and developers, I think we understand that this is happening regionally. But that actually kind of puts me in the, I'm not in as big of a hurry. I'd like to move with the cohort and do it at the same time as them, so we're not putting extra strain, as Maxine pointed out. We're recovering from a fire, and our planning department is probably the most taxed department in our city right now. And so to have them trailblaze a new EUI program and how that works and how to do all that is a lot to add. And it kind of feels like one of those moments where our neighbors can step up and kind of lead the way here, and we can go with that motion. And I think if our communities weren't moving forward, I'd be a little bit more concerned. If we were behind everybody, I'd be more concerned, like we need to act because we're clearly not following the cohort. We're ahead of the cohort, and that makes me proud. But it kind of feels like we need to be ashamed of not having done more yet. And I just want to take that shame out of the room. Like, I think we're doing a good job, and I think we have a passion to move forward with that. And Kayla, I think you have direction from this body to keep going. Like, keep going, right? There's no hesitancy on this board to say anything else than we want more, we want more, we want more, and we're pushing towards eventually net zero. And even as Tiffany said, I think pushing towards retrofitting, because that's the other thing we need to understand is if we do or don't pass this code, we might get 6 buildings in the next 2 years, I don't know. I mean, it takes a couple years to build a building. So we're talking a very small quantity of buildings built to a very different, very, very small difference in the code. They'll all be building to the 2021 IECC EV ready, solar ready, electric preferred. That's amazing. The next building built in Louisville will be the most energy efficient building in the history of our city without doing anything today. So should we not do anything today? No, not necessarily. We might want to go further. I kind of like this code. And what I like about the EUI is it's adjustable year over year or 3 years over 3 years. You just tweak it a little bit. and you move the number from 23 to 22 to 21, and you start inching without these huge changes. You inch towards net zero. I love that. So actually, I kind of like the code that came back. Gun in my head, I'd vote for it today. It's just there isn't one, and I think this is happening in the next 6 months, and I'd like to do it with my neighbors. Doesn't mean I don't care about the environment. I would just like to do this lockstep with our neighbors. And if it passes tonight, I'm not going to be very upset. I'm not really emotionally charged about it, because if it passes tonight, you're probably right, Deb. It's probably just 6 months ahead of everybody else. And if it doesn't pass tonight, I'm not really that upset either, because we're probably 6 months away from passing something like this. So I'm really calm on this right now. I'll probably support working on this in the first quarter with a little bit more information and along with the cohort. But again, not super upset about the opposite direction. That's it for me.
Any other comments from folks? All right, so we are voting on a motion to table first. And so the motion is to table the ordinance until February 21st with some additional public input sessions in the interim. City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Mayor Stolzman?
No.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
No.
Councilmember Most?
No.
Thank you, everyone. Now we're voting on the main motion, which is a motion to approve ordinance 1845. Is that right? Yes, 1845, Series 2022. Any other discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Sorry, we're voting on the main motion, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. We can take a break, but well, we usually take a break at 8, so let's take a 10-minute break. It's 9:04, so we'll be back at 9:14.
So quit.
All right, we'll get started again when folks get back up here.
Oh, that's right. I saw her name.
I didn't even know people were throwing around the flyer.
I already did. Next up, we have Resolution 55, Series 2022, a resolution amending the 22 budget by amending appropriations in the Solid Waste and Recycling Fund and Golf Course Fund with additional appropriations within such fund. This is our public hearing. It's advertised in the Daily Camera on 12/16/2022. I'll open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Victoria Runkle. I'm the interim finance director for the city. This year we are recommending what was often referred to as a cleanup ordinance in my lingo, which is we clean out, we look through all the line items of the budget and we say, are we going to be under or over appropriations? Because in the end, that's the most important thing. We can't end up we can't end up spending more than we appropriated. So I made Jeff go through almost every line item. And so we went through every line item and we ended up with only 2 funds that we are asking for any changes. And primarily that's because you have also had 2 or 3, I'm a little unclear about that, amendments already because of the fire. And so we have some appropriation levels in most of the funds. So the 2 funds that, the first one is really small, is $20,000 in the Solid Waste and Recycling Fund. And I almost didn't even ask, if the golf course hadn't needed it, I probably wouldn't have asked for this one. I probably would have told them to stay in their budget. But they have a hazardous waste line item where they've over encumbered the money. They haven't spent it yet. And so I wanted to make certain that we cover it in case there are expenditures. And so that's for $20,000. They're over by 13 in that particular line item for hazardous waste contract that they have. And then the other major one was the golf course. And as I laid out in the memo to you very quickly, the line items were, again, one was personnel, but most of that personnel, I don't want to speak for the golf course, but most of the personnel was related to, working on fire issues afterwards. So they're over budget in that line item, which we will get reimbursed at some point. We haven't gotten the reimbursement for any of those. We have 2 expenditures for the Marshall Fire that were in what I would call supplies or minor capital. So we have that, which again, we will be reimbursed. We have not been reimbursed for those yet. So again, that money will come back to us. And then we have, the biggest one was the golf course has sold over $189,000 as of today, of cost of goods on a budget of 130. So that's all revenue, so it's offsetting revenue, but we have to appropriate it anyway. So that was and I rounded it up to 200. in hopes that there would be a lot of people that would do last minute Christmas shopping. So I rounded that up to 200,000. What's true. And so that's why I rounded up to 200,000. And then of course, when people purchase, they use their credit cards. And so we had banking charges there too.
Councilmember Most.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
People purchasing things with credit cards, not employees using credit cards for
Oh,
things.
no,
Okay,
it's
thank you. I
people
was like,
using their credit card to purchase all the $200,000 worth of cost of goods sold. It's called cost of goods sold. So, but because of that, we also have higher fees. So that's the major part, and I did get asked at the break, is revenue offsetting this? And the answer is there will be revenue to offset all of these costs or more, to be honest, after we get the reimbursements, particularly from the fire costs.
Thank you. Any members of the public care to comment on this presentation? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion or discussion. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. Are we only going through one cycle of public?
Yes,
Okay,
close the
good.
hearing.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve resolution number 55, series 2022, and I'd like to make a few comments. I mean,
second.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
as noted by the finance director, the golf course is doing very well and can cover all these costs. And this is we're only appropriating the expense side, so this isn't showing the revenue side. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes, thank you, everyone. I move that we approve on first reading North End Block 11, 1501 East South Boulder Road, an ordinance number 1846, Series 2022, an ordinance approving a fourth amendment to the North End General Development Plan to amend allowed residential uses on Planning Area 1 and standards for roof overhang encroachments within setbacks and easements for Block 11. This is our first reading, and we'll set the public hearing for 2/7/2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, everyone. And I'll move we approve ordinance number 1847, Series 2022, an ordinance approving a partial vacation of 6 portions of an exclusive city utility easement on Block 11 of North End Block 11 replat of North End Parcel 1, Outlot H and Outlot K replat subdivision, first reading, and set the public hearing for 2/7/2023. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say
Aye.
aye. Aye. And next, that takes us to consent agenda item C, approval of the use of stadium funds for the Bronco reimbursement. So I'd just like to make a proposal to council in the spirit of how we proceeded with our budget. So the staff put together a really nice report suggesting that they would do a study, basically a subcommittee to determine how to spend this fund. What I would propose to the council, our youth activities sub-program is operating at a deficit between 2023 and 2024 of $260,710. And our playground replacement program also operates without, enough revenue to cover it. So I would propose that we program the funds to one of those two things. And then we can reduce the transfer into either the recreation fund or to the capital projects fund by the subsequent amount. And that gives council the full flexibility to do with what they want. Basically $260,000, $254,000. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Second.
Well, I wasn't making a motion, and I just want to, if anyone has discussions about what I was proposing, it just basically, we have identified through the budgeting process our highest priority for youth activities. It's the youth activities sub-program. So I would like to program this money to that and then reduce the transfer from the general fund proportionately.
Does it really matter which?
It just allows, through the budgeting process, us to identify our highest priority things. So then this will go to our highest priority youth programming, and we've already identified that through the budget, and it basically puts more money back into the general fund for you all to determine whatever you want to do with it.
I guess I don't know, my vote would be for the playgrounds. I think we have.
Playgrounds is fine too. Either one is at a deficit. I picked two things we've already identified that don't have enough funding to cover the entire cost. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think my only issue is kind of like when, like the comparisons, like when lottery money comes in for schools and like, oh, we can reduce the school budget. So I get it's a deficit, it's not the same. But like, well, if we were gonna cover that deficit with general funds and now we're getting another 250, well, we're just gonna do it, like, we're not actually adding, if we were gonna do it anyways, then we're not actually adding to it. But to your point, we can do whatever we want with it, but will we put it towards youth sports and activities or not is the only, so I don't have a problem with it, but I just want to be aware that this should be additive, not replacing something, but to your point, it's a deficit, so it's.
So let me just tell you a little bit about the spirit in which I'm making the proposal as well. So we hear all the time from staff that they're overworked and stressed out and burdened and this and that and the other. And so the idea of coming up with new programming when we've already identified the highest priorities, it seems like, well, this is the perfect kind of thing to say, put this toward what we're doing. We could tuck away the other money and there will be something that comes up. It'll be a youth activity. And then council can be like, okay, we know what it's for. And I just, when I read the thing about putting together putting together a group to look at this and study it and this and that, it's like, we already are getting told all the time people don't have time to do anything. So that's that, and in the spirit of how we did our budget, where we said we want to take care of what we have first, we want to make sure that, you know, the assets we have are well maintained and things like that before we do new. So that's why I'm proposing this. We'll just go down the line. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Well, I appreciate your comment, Councilor Dickinson. When I look at something like this, I think it was a grant, you know, and what do we do with grants? We program them. And for me, this is supposed to go towards some, you know, youth activity, and I think of playgrounds. And so that's a good investment, I think, into whether either pay for the ones we have programmed or add additional ones. You know, this money can be programmed to do that, and I think that's within the spirit of this, and it's something we already have a process for identifying places to do that.
Councilmember Fahey?
I would just wonder if we could have a little bit of input from our Parks and Rec
Absolutely.
Director, who could tell us where you think the money could be most effectively productive or helpful.
Well, the obvious answer is wherever you want it to go. I've been doing this for a while. But I will say this, you know, there is some element of this as we looked at it as quote unquote new money, right? That where there was a little bit of creativity involved, there has been some work already done, you know, with programming efforts as it relates to cultural services and you know, things we could do at the library to encourage inclusion, that type of stuff. You know, at a programmatic level, a lot of the recreation side can be and was forecasted to cover projected costs, you know, by offsetting, you know, one thing or another for recreational programming. Open Space was going to propose a contractor-led interpretive education program. And then Parks also had a couple suggestions that were thrown in there. So, and golf also was going to provide some golf equipment to the youth programs, that kind of stuff. That all being said, though, you know, that's just one option. I will say this, meeting with my counterparts on this exact topic, because it's a hot button topic all over the place. It was unexpected money. The amount that we're receiving is relatively small compared to other jurisdictions. There's not a consistent way of doing this amongst any municipality. Some are just dropping it to the bottom line to offset fees. Some are doing large-scale capital projects. You know, it's really, there's not a right or wrong answer, I guess, in some ways. You know, we'll serve at your pleasure here.
I was just at the Parks Advisory Board meeting, and they were talking a little bit. We had a presentation from Mandy Pereira, who gave a wonderful presentation on all the things that are happening for the youth at the rec center, and that they were getting another grant that was going to help with the preschool program, I believe, but because the state's paying for all-day preschool, and so that's adding some to their program. So I'm just wondering if they need more, would it enhance the program more? Because she did say that there were still going to be some cost differences for the preschool program or the daycare program.
Yeah, it could be, as well as back to the playground thing, there are
Right.
different improvements that we could do for the preschool area playground to enhance their experience while they're participating in our programs as well. And so I think that there's an element where it can be whatever we want it to be. There's a desire to, use it to offset some one-time staffing expenses or some retention trainings or something like that to keep our
Right.
youth staff engaged and on board.
Right.
But there's other things that we can, if it's a little bit more general, where it's going to the mayor's suggestion of youth programs that are running a deficit and playgrounds, we can make that work too.
City Manager Durbin wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, there's probably a million different ways to cut this. I think that the mayor's proposal is simple and adds to the bottom line. And, if we have a strong financial position that allows parks and rec and so forth to come back with proposals in the future for budget amendments as may be appropriate for your consideration. So I'm fine with this approach. It's simple. And like Adam said, at your pleasure.
And I just want to add on that idea, like, I'm totally for funding the playgrounds to the full extent, and the whole council really is. And every time the playgrounds have come in over budget, I mean, they cost more. And when we ask the community what they want at their playground, they have really good ideas and they're expensive. And so I'm not proposing it wouldn't go to youth sports. I'm just proposing a very simple way of accounting and reporting for this so that it's just entered into our system and done. And then as those things come up and we say, City Manager Durbin, how will we pay for this overage, or how will we pay for this unexpected cost? He'll say, well, we have additional revenue in our general fund to cover the cost. Councilmember Most.
One of the reasons I like the playground idea is from an equity standpoint, that everybody in the community has access to that. If we fund programs, some of these programs have fees or they're restricted to certain whatever age, tightly limited ages, whatever. I mean, I think our playgrounds really do a great service for, little tiny tots to, I don't know, if my daughter was on them 12, 13, something like that. So and it's spread around the community, and I just think it's sort of like that way everybody gets access to this pile. So that's my thought.
Councilmember Brown.
I feel like my council career is coming full circle. I think the first conversation that I had about city policy was with the mayor was about playgrounds, specifically about swing sets. But I do like a good playground, and so I'm very, very much in support of what we're all talking about. I think it's good. I think flexibility is good, and I also, like swing sets apparently. So there you go.
So are we okay with changing the direction slightly, generally speaking? I think that's what I heard, but the hour is late, so I may not have heard correctly. All right, City Manager Durbin, are you clear on what direction we've just given?
Yes, excuse me, yes, that we allocate that towards the playground expenditures.
Great.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Certainly.
Is it just for the playgrounds? Is this a either or is it
the way I
a
proposed-
combination of?
The way I proposed it, and most people got more excited about the playgrounds, so you'll keep that in mind. But what I proposed was either youth activity sub-program or playgrounds, and then either of those has a transfer in from the general fund to cover the cost. So.
Very good. I'll follow.
Is that okay with
I'll follow my
everybody with that
boss's direction.
That just gives them one more point of light to move around. Okay, great. And where does that take us in our meeting? That takes us to our city attorney report.
I have no report this evening. Thank you.
That takes us to our council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. All right, with that, we are adjourned.